town of the good, the bad, and the weird. You either live by the gun, or you die by the sword.
Welcome to The Good, the Bad, and the Weird. I'm Nico.
And I'm Chris. Hey, Nico, you looking for a saxophone player and a bass player heading down to Florida?
I'm looking for someone who can play it hot.
Some Like It Hot.
Yes, so we are doing Some Like It Hot today.
Yes.
I think this is really our first important comedy film.
Yes.
Specifically, the version we viewed was the Criterion collection. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
also our first dip, I think, into Marilyn Monroe.
Yes. Yeah. No, it is.
Which cracks me up because, yes, she is a leading character, but she's not the main character.
No, she's not. And I'll get into that a little bit.
Yes.
I am going to be biased. This is one of my favorite comedy movies.
As is mine.
Yeah. For good reason, too. I mean, it's not just, we think it's funny, like Kung Pao.
Which, granted, is a different type of classy comedy.
Yes. This is genuinely a smart movie.
It is. It really is, yeah.
And because of this movie, what are we drinking today, Chris?
Well, unfortunately, we couldn't find a hot water bottle heater to pour it out of.
Yeah. Manhattans.
Cheers. But honestly, from this movie, we could have just had a straight bottle of whiskey, and that would have also been appropriate.
Yeah.
There's a lot of drinking in this movie for something being shot, something that was supposed to have been in the era of Prohibition.
Exactly. So, for those who aren't familiar with Some Like It Hot, because I know a lot of people who are not, because it is an
It is an older movie.
It's an old comedy. It's about two musicians who, to escape the mob, cross-dress and travel with an all-female band to Florida.
Yes, which that is a real light description of the movie.
I mean, it is basically the entire movie.
Yes, it is. But despite being a pretty basic plot, they managed to work in quite a lot of twists and turns for this one, which really makes this movie, I think, one of the classics that it has become. Just because if it had been straight, kind of what we see nowadays with comedy, where it's more road trip, straight there, comedies along the way, joke is over.
Yeah.
I don't think it would have lasted long. Instead, we get more character development on all three leading characters.
Yeah.
We even get some side development with, like, background characters who we do not care about and will never see again partway through the movie. And then halfway through the movie, we get introduced to my favorite character, the creepy old man.
Ah, yeah. So, getting into it a little bit, Some Like It Hot is a 1959 romantic comedy written by Billy Wilder and I.A.L. Diamond. Mm-hmm. It was also directed by Billy Wilder.
Yes.
Diamond actually said that he and Wilder spent a year developing the script, and it was originally about poverty that compelled men to cross-dress as women, but they ultimately decided that it would work better as a period. It would be better with a period setting, and it also just made the situation easier for the audience to accept men cross-dressing if it was set during the 20s or the Roaring 20s jazz age.
Yes.
Also with gangland shootings.
Yeah, because we have to have some good old-fashioned mobsters coming in for good measure.
Yes. Before we really get into it, though, I would like to note that my main sources for this movie, because one, I'm not very good at analyzing comedy.
Fair.
So my main sources for this is the film scholar Howard Suber's document or commentary on the structural analysis of this movie.
Yes.
As well as various interviews with the cast, crew, and the director.
Yes.
As well as just all the various commentary on the Criterion DVD, which I highly recommend.
Yeah, it was stellar.
Honestly, Suber's analysis is fantastic. I have way more notes than I actually transferred over.
Yes.
But I just can't do the film justice like him.
Yeah, I understand.
But he also just breaks down comedy in a much more understandable way.
Fair.
Yeah.
I also found a couple of interviews with Tony, one of the lead actors, much later in his life and career, where he reflected back on working with Jack and Marilyn.
Yeah. Also, side little note that I found interesting. Criterion invented the audio commentary.
Oh, that's useful.
Yeah, it was on their Laserdisc release of King Kong.
You know what? Good job.
Yeah.
I have watched many a movie in just commentary form.
Yeah, I told Parker that, and he's like, that's something that's weird to think about, that audio commentary is something that someone had to invent at some point.
Someone had to invent it, and since then I have consumed so much of it.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. And so, this film does star, as you mentioned, Tony Curtis.
Yes.
Jack Lemmon.
A delight.
And Marilyn Monroe.
Yeah. But almost didn't star any of them.
Yeah, weirdly enough, at the time, Tony Curtis was a popular matinee idol.
Yes.
Jack Lemmon was an up-and-coming funny man who really hadn't made a mark for himself yet. And
no, not yet, but he will.
Monroe was a big name at this point.
She was a huge name at this point. People would go see movies just because she's in it. And,
like you said, all of them almost weren't in it.
Yeah.
At the time, the people in charge of financing the film wanted Sinatra in Tony Curtis's role.
I can totally see why they would want Frank Sinatra, especially in this movie.
Sorry, in place of Lemon.
Yes, in place of Lemon. I can see it, but he didn't show up to the audition, so he didn't get the part.
Exactly, and they wanted him to be paired with Mitzi Gaynor,
which I think on paper sounds good, but I don't think the chemistry would have quite been there like it was with Tony and Jack.
Well, and at the time they were taking a big risk because
this was
they weren't comedic actors. They weren't known for being comedic actors.
Very true. And Marilyn wasn't even on their radar until she told them that she had an interest in the movie.
Well, there's a couple things with that too, because this one isn't the one she was actually interested in. It was one afterwards that she wanted the lead for, another Wilder movie.
She definitely wanted the lead, but this was, I think, a good movie fit for her, at least character-wise.
Well, the thing is, they wanted a big name with it.
Yeah, and she was as big as you could go.
Once she was picked, they didn't care who else was in it. They had Monroe.
They did. And they didn't just have Monroe. She sang 4 of the songs for this film.
Yes. Which one of them did get cut, but was later released on an LP. And it was the opening track.
Yeah. And, just her she could have done just one song, and people would have gone and seen this movie for that. Yeah.
And she was actually hesitant in taking the role to begin with.
Yeah.
She said, I don't want to play someone who can't tell Daphne or Josephine are really men dressed in drag.
I mean, I can see her hesitance, because Sugar, the character that Marilyn plays, is written as not the brightest tool in the shed.
She's the very stereotypical dumb blonde.
Yes, but
not really dumb, more ditzy.
She is a very ditzy. She's very carefree, but she's written. I don't think it's necessarily quite as super stereotype as what we think of today, especially with how far that comedy has gone as far as stereotyping dumb blondes. I mean, we have whole movies over literally nothing but the fact that someone is blonde.
Legally Blonde.
Yeah, and pretty much every other 90s comedy that needed to throw a joke of, it was such a thing.
Yeah.
But she is written as a caricature to the point that the audience is, oh, hi. The audience is not being fooled that Sugar is, a quote-unquote realistic person. She is over the top in caricature because everyone in this film is a caricature.
Yes. So, as well, in Monroe's contracts, all her films were to be in color. This is black and white.
It is. And I can see why, from Marilyn's side of the story, she would want it in color. Because that was kind of her whole stick. Mm-hmm. She is a bombshell beauty. Yeah. With the bright red lip, the full perfect face, and her clothes always were something that was catchy and very fashionable at the time.
She had the va-va-voom.
She did. Yeah. And the costume director of this film really played that up. Maybe too far. I will have comments later on that.
But yes and no. We'll get into that.
We'll get into it. But at the same time, the quote-unquote drag that Tony and Jack are in for this whole movie, it looks better in black and white. It just truly does, and it's more believable in black and white.
Well, and we'll get into why it's in black and white in a little bit.
Yeah.
So, I think part of what convinced her is they gave her 10% of the gross, which...
I mean, that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money.
And just to put it out there, this is a cast or group of actors, directors, and writers that I'm not very familiar with. The only one I'm actually somewhat familiar with is Marilyn Monroe, and that's like 3 movies, 7-Year Itch, Let's Make Love, and like that's my extent of Monroe too. And
while I admittedly I like Monroe and her films, I wouldn't say she's my favorite actress or actor from this era of American cinema. Some of the side characters are people I do recognize, and but I don't know how many people nowadays would necessarily recognize them, because I like these old movies. I watch them fairly regularly. So one of the reasons why I like the old man character is because he's played by an actor who plays a lot of comedic roles. He was the leading, one of the top comedians at the time. And so I recognize him from all that. I recognize that big stupid grin from all these other characters. It's a little bit like seeing Mr. Bean in a movie. You know the face.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I mean, for me, I do watch a lot of old movies, but they're generally foreign films.
Yes.
Specifically Japanese and exploitation films from the eras. Which, unfortunately, I have to move on from the samurai films in the Criterion because I have purchased all the ones that are available right now.
Oh, gotta find a new hobby.
Exactly. So, to give a little premise to this movie, no one thought this movie was going to be successful at all.
Which, I mean, that's one way to walk into your movie. Especially for the 50s, which at the time was a very conservative time for America. We were, towards the end of the 50s, which is when this came out, we were starting to break that mold. But, it was still a throw your eyebrows up at some risque behavior sort of thing.
Well, and I think we can see some of the ripple effects with this now, because film producer, screenwriter, and executive Dade O. Selznick thought that Wilder was out of his mind to make a comedy based around the St. Valentine's Day Massacre.
Yes, which, for those of you who don't know, is pretty much kind of a very similar... They pretty much took it from history and put it in the movie.
Yeah, and I'll get into that a little bit when we actually get to that scene.
Yeah, so. It's not like there was a super strong parody of the massacre.
Yeah, and for that, I actually, by today's standards, I completely disagree with. Suber says that all humor is gallow humor. That is based on the threat of one's own extinction, usually in the psychological sense of being humiliated or banished from the community.
Sure, I think a lot of people wrap it up into dark humor nowadays.
Well, I can relate to this as you know, I have told a number of jokes and made a number of comments that, if you do not know me, they don't land very well. A lot of times they still don't land very well, but
a niche genre.
There's a reason my brother sends me memes of, that bowling meme, normal conversation, random serial killer fact.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, he also mentions that if you're going to make fun of something, go all in.
True. And this movie went all in. Which I think is, again, part of the reason why it's sustained as far as it has. Because, the 1950s were definitely... not just more conservative in, the drag part of this movie or the free love that this movie promotes, but just kind of the general, overall of this movie being a romance comedy that has multiple murders in it. The gang, the mobsters in it are, by today's standards, pretty light and humorous, but I could see how that would be taken something very seriously back in the 50s. That wouldn't have been much of a joke.
Yeah, I mean...
So, they were taking some risks with this one.
Oh, yeah. So, let's go all in ourselves into the movie. So, the opening credits start with a title card set to upbeat music and opening credits. So, despite being despite color films being prevalent for the time.
Yeah.
Wilder actually decided to make this film black and white because specifically it was a period piece.
And honestly, I think it works perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
Because while there is like, we've seen a resurgence of this recently. There's been a wave of films set in the 20s and 30s kind of recently. And the recent ones kind of have a dirty, grimy vibe to all of them.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas this one, even when they're like shooting people and playing cards in a garage, still has that crispness to it.
Yeah, it's very much a throwback to old gangster movies.
Yes.
Like, even older than what we're used to. Like, we're talking like the original Scarface from the 30s.
The old school stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And it goes nicely because the gangsters in this movie bother to put on a fun accent, even though it's not necessary. We're in Chicago.
Yeah. Well, no, we are in Chicago.
We're in Chicago. The accent, I would argue, not super Chicagoan.
Well, I mean,
it's a little stereotypical gangster accent.
Well, it is played off the Italian mob of the time.
It is. Which, fun fact, I took an entire class in college about the mob because of course I did. So yeah, like the Chicago mob, very much a real thing. Very much like second in command to the New York mob. So like, hilarious. I'm not convinced the Chicago mob had a New York accent though.
Nah, I mean, it's just of the time, though.
It was. And honestly, it does add to the atmosphere, and it makes it really quick and easy to pick out who's in the mob and who's not, which is kind of an important part for this movie. So, I don't hate it. It doesn't bother me. If anything, it just adds to the comedy effect.
Yeah. And so, after the credits roll, we see a hearse full of goons roll up.
I love this intro scene because we set the risks real high, but we also let the audience know what the level of comedy we're going in here with is.
It's pretty lowball.
It's so hilarious. When you imagine like the old school gangster movies with the shooting ups and guns a-blazing, every like clown car amount of people, this is that movie.
Yeah.
And it's gold.
Yeah, and so we as an audience know they're goons.
Yes.
But they're also in a hearse.
They are in a hearse.
And
but the hearse is loaded with guns.
We only find out about that because they're being chased by the cops.
Yes.
Who proceed to shoot at them.
Yes. And then the coffin starts leaking.
Yes.
Which we've had recent history of coffins leaking, but this is not gross, weird coffin juice that you shouldn't drink. This is alcohol.
Because after they get away a little bit, they open up the hearse the coffin.
Yes.
Or casket. It's a casket.
It's a casket.
There is a clear definition, and this is not the movie for that.
No, it's not.
It is a casket, and it is full of prohibition liquor because...
Yep.
As we get a location and date with the placeholder card, or whatever it's called, of Chicago, 1929.
Smack dab during Prohibition.
Yep.
So this is going to be one of those films.
Yep.
And I love it.
I do too.
I especially love the creativity of this one because a lot of Prohibition films, especially nowadays, take it as like this super underground secret community that you have to know the special knock to get in.
Yeah.
Whereas this one makes it, I think, especially because when this was filmed and when it came out, people remembered Prohibition, I think, a little better than we currently do.
Because, I mean, Prohibition was only, like, less than or just over a decade by the time this movie came out.
Yeah, so, like, people had a little bit better remembrance of, like, how strict things truly were, depending on where you were and who you were.
Yeah.
And so, the fact that the mob is running a quote-unquote coffee shop in the back of their parlor.
Even before that, so, there's little details of comedy in this. The hearse pulls up to Mozzarella's funeral parlor.
Stupid, but I love it.
Yeah, which we know that the cops are staking out.
Yes,
and that they're in cahoots with a rat named Charlie.
Charlie, gonna rat him out.
Not also my asshole Charlie, but a
yeah,
Charlie,
not that one. But that is another thing that I like the detail for this movie. Everyone's name is so frickin' stereotypical that it's perfect.
Yeah.
Because normally, if you give a character a name like Joe or Jack, it doesn't really stick, and it doesn't really like, land.
Mm-hmm.
But because this movie is just one giant stereotype of the 1930s, it's perfect.
Yeah. So, as you did mention, the funeral parlor is a disguise for a speakeasy.
It is, but they take it so far that the wait staff, when they come up, say, "We have coffee for sale," and they just list off different types of whiskeys.
Yeah, pretty much.
But because all of them have the name coffee in front of them, and they come out in a coffee cup, it's coffee.
Yeah. And so the cop that we were following from the beginning gets in there.
Yep.
And he wants the seats closest to the band. But there's one that's reserved for members of the immediate family.
The immediately deceased family.
Yes. And as he's seated, they show up.
Yes.
And
in perfect mob style.
Where a very intoxicated man spills his coffee on the head honcho Spats, and
which we quickly learn he is the only man who wears this, like, pristine white level Spats.
Which, speak about a distinguishing feature of a character, the thing that distinguishes him is tarnished at the very beginning.
Yes.
So because I am not into old-fashioned like you are,
yes,
I had to look up what exactly Spats were.
I mean, if you're in choir or ballroom dance, I think they're still around. Kind of like cover buns, but, like, most people don't wear them.
Maybe show choir, because I never had to wear them.
That's fair. I think it does depend on, like... I also think it depends on, like, your choir director, because I had one choir director who was real into, like, cover buns and ties and, like, super formal dresses for the ladies. And then I had another one who was like, wear jeans and a black shirt. You're good. You're good.
Yeah, so... Spats are a garment of clothing that is used to cover the shoes and socks to prevent tarnishing from mud and rain.
And these would be like your high-polished black leather shoes.
Yeah.
Your fancy outfit.
Well, also a distinction why it's interesting that he's wearing them is that they actually fell out of favor in the 1920s.
Yes.
And so that adds to his distinction of he is different from the common goon.
I also think that at this point in history, Spats, kind of like a lot of, like, high-end fashion, were not just falling out of fashion, but were kind of thought as, like, old school.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit of grandpa wear, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I think they were too formal for, like, the average person. So this guy is dressing crazy formal, a little out of fashion, but not so much that, like, people are going to be like, oh my god, he's wearing Spats.
Yeah.
But, like, he's also the only one in the room wearing them.
Yeah, exactly.
He's overdressed everywhere he goes.
Yeah. And so after they sit down, we move over to the band, where we focus on a sax player and a bassist.
Yes.
A
bassist who regularly throughout this movie calls himself like a violinist or something like that. And I had to spend the whole movie going, I'm so glad my husband is not watching.
Yeah. Brian...
He hasn't watched this one yet. We will get to it because, like, I have a copy of this as well. And I will make him watch it because this is a classic gold. But as someone who was in band, and he took band very seriously. He played in college and, you know...
That was his major.
That was literally his major, and, like, his whole family is in the band world, so, like, this is a very dear topic to him.
Yeah. The
abuse that their instruments take throughout this movie is terrible. Holy cow.
Yeah. So, I am actually going to refer to Super's commentary a little bit on this.
Yeah.
He said that, duos are always the best.
Yeah.
And I actually had a little bit of a thought on this the past couple nights after I wrote up the outline.
Mm-hmm.
I was just thinking it's not unlike Will Ferrell's work.
Sure.
Like, most of his movies are
a duo
of some kind.
I think especially for not just the time period this is written to be in, but, like, when it was actually written.
Yeah.
Having kind of a two-man comedy duo was pretty common, not just in film, but just stage stand-up too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's been kind of a recent development where you don't see a duo on stage anymore at all.
Yeah.
Like, I can't think of any who are currently popular anyway. I mean, outside of film. Film, you get stuck with people because you need more characters, you have to have something to go off of, but just stand-up in general is usually at least, like, a straight man and the jokester act, that was fairly common. That was pretty popular.
Yeah, I know there's a pair of twin comedians. I can't remember their names. I don't watch a lot of stand-up comedy, but I do remember them because there's two of them.
Yeah, which is nowadays a standout feature. It used to be pretty common.
Yeah. Another thing that Sauber mentions is that tragedy is universal, and comedy is culturally and temporarily specific.
Sure, I agree with that.
I think is important to this movie specifically because instead of making it a contemporary movie, setting it in the past, they can keep the jokes within that time era.
Yes.
Rather than, like, going back to some of Will Ferrell's stuff. It was, like, which one? It was Watson and Holmes. They
sure.
made a Trump joke.
Yes, which, in 20 years, I don't know how funny that will be.
Oh,
it might be because Trump was such a historical figure.
So,
but at the same time, like, meh.
That movie was actually one of the ones I rewatched, and I kind of forgot about the joke.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And it doesn't land that well great. Like,
yeah, I think part of the reason why historical comedy from this standpoint landed so solidly was when it came out, it was just old enough for people to remember it, but it's not fresh. It's not no one's having any hurt feelings over it. It's all long gone, and you can have a good crack at how ridiculous our situation was.
Yeah.
But they also picked a time period where they knew that was going to be like a pinpoint in history, that from that point on, no matter how far in the future their movies watched, everyone's going to have some idea of Prohibition, will have kind of a rough idea of the gangster life in America, and will kind of know about big bands, even if you don't know a lot.
Yeah.
That's all. That's the formula. That's all you need. And so even if, like, maybe the nuances of how ridiculous the drinking jokes are lost, you still know that it's a joke.
Yeah, and I think it was Tony Curtis who mentioned in one of the interviews that, like, when you're doing comedy, you can't know it's funny. You just have to say it and hope for the best. You can't pretend like you are funny.
Yes.
Because then it doesn't come across well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know, I think that's important. That's something important to understand with comedy, especially for someone like me who I've never really had that American sense of comedy.
Sure.
Mine's always been a very dry or dark comedy to begin with. And this movie feels a lot of that.
This movie definitely leans in.
Yeah. And so the duo begin to argue because today is payday and they need to figure out what they're going to do with the money because they owe everyone.
Everyone.
The sax player is wanting to gamble it away on a dog race.
Yep.
And the bassist is wanting to pay off people as he can.
Yep. I like that from the beginning we're shown that this is a pretty standard comic duo where we've got the straight uptight guy and we've got the little bit more free and fun guy who's willing to gamble with his life and his money a little harder.
Yes. And we already know that they're down on their luck.
Yeah.
And what happens? They look over and they see the cop who begins to take out his badge.
Oh boy, now they're in a speakeasy during a raid.
Exactly. So they begin to bail, and
do they drop their instruments and run? Oh, hell no. They pick those bad boys up and take them with them.
Because that's expensive.
Oh, it is very expensive. However, a bass is a big instrument.
Yeah.
It takes up a lot of room.
Yeah. And so, the raid is in chaos.
Oh, it's
the drunk
everywhere.
man is brought back in saying he wants coffee. He's
a delightful background character. He's doing his part just right.
Yeah. He's
in there just long enough.
And he continues. So one thing I will say about this movie, it's one of those movies where so much of the dialogue pays off.
Yes.
Because this man saying he wants coffee shows up a second time.
Mm-hmm.
And while they're outside, he's also saying he wants it, which supposedly the rule of comedy is you do it 3 times.
Yeah, this is the golden rule.
Doing that is breaking taboo, as we learned from Wild Wild West.
Yes.
Where he says, that's a human head. He says it 4 times.
Yes, he does.
So, there is a brief exchange between the cop and Spats, which we learn his name is Spats, And they're going to take them downtown. They've been busted, but...
This is it. They caught him red-handed, finally.
He's been drinking buttermilk.
Yes. Not alcohol at all. Perfectly legal.
Well, yeah, I just went to A Clockwork Orange.
I think the buttermilk is probably just there to be like, my breath's so stank you can't tell. Because this is before breathalyzers.
Yeah.
So if you don't smell of booze, you can't prove anything. And my breath smells like dragon's butt.
Also... Don't get high on the supply.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so, as everyone's herded into the paddy wagons, the camera pans to the alley and then tilts up to the duo who have escaped to a fire hatch. Or fire escape.
Still with their instruments.
Yes, which no one looks up.
No one looks up.
That is a common thing.
But like, as we've said as architects, we are fully aware and appreciate that they played off of the fact that no one ever looks up. And
on a piece of architecture that's only normally used in chase scenes.
Yeah.
Or escape scenes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love it.
But Suber puts it as it's Wilder's way of keeping the action moving.
Yeah. Because this whole movie's pace is spot on.
Oh yeah, because instead of just having this standstill and you see them getting down, it's actively moving to direct you to them away from what just happened.
Yes.
And so they continue to argue because now they've lost their payday.
They have exactly no money.
And we learn their names. Joe is the sax player and Jerry is the bassist. Joe is still wanting to place his bets, while Jerry just doesn't trust him, and he's just looking to get by.
Yeah, he'd like a hot dinner, please.
Yes. And so, another little bit that I love about this movie, again, the little bits of detail, because we cut to them getting off the CTA railway with no coats.
They had just talked about how they were going to pawn them off, and that's what they do.
And so they're even further down on their luck, and now they're going to a music agency to look for work.
And I like the music agency scene because the dialogue doesn't break. There's no part of them sitting and waiting while the dialogue continues. They're actively moving throughout this whole scene, busting in on doors, hollering at the front desk secretary, "Any work?" "No." And then they go on to the next room, all while maintaining their dialogue about their troubles and what they want out of life.
Yes. And one of them is actually a jab at another music label.
Yes.
There's a single secretary who, I think her response is, "What do you think?" She has a bottle of whiskey on her desk.
Yes, she does.
Again, there's a lot of booze.
It's a lot of booze for Brohibition.
Brohibition?
I mean, this movie turns into Brohibition.
Yeah. So, we finally get to the last music agency where Joe's
sweet on the secretary.
But he has pissed her off because he has skipped out on a date.
Rude, Joe.
And we also learned that he's kind of a player.
Oh, he's not just kind of full on a player.
Yeah. Yeah.
This man has been around the block, but the secretary knows it. She likes the danger.
Well, also, other side little note, a lot of lines in this scene are reused later on in the movie.
Yeah.
Which is something that I feel is like that can be slightly looked over. If you're not trying to pay attention to it.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. And so, after smoothing it over with his gal,
she lets it slip that it just so happens that they are looking for two musicians.
There might be a job.
Yeah, maybe.
But they would have to talk to the boss, and the boys will have to wait as he already has clients and they're with him. Emphasis on boys. So, we now cut to the office where the band manager is pissed off at the music agency because two of their musicians, their sax player and their bassist, have absconded. And one of them has just left and the other's gone to hook up with a man.
She getting married and leaving? Rude.
Yeah. And so they need 2 musicians by 8 o'clock for their tour to Florida.
Which sounds lovely.
Yeah. And so now they leave and Joe and Jerry burst in.
And are ready to not take a hint.
They are ready for the job.
They will do anything for this job. Where
they've learned that they've been jilted because they don't have the right equipment.
Yes. it's a all-girls band.
Yes. They've been set up. But there is a Valentine's Day.
Yeah, there's a Valentine's Day, 100 miles away.
Valentine's Day dance.
Yeah, that sounds, up and up.
Nice little hint of what's up and coming.
Yeah.
So, as they leave, back in the lobby, Joe is, again, sweet-talking Nellie to borrow the car.
Yeah, this is, I think, the best part to show off Joe's current character and, the minor character development that happens with him.
Oh, yeah.
Because he sets up this girl who's already informed him that she's mad at him because he dumped a date on her, didn't show up, cold turkeyed, and now he's teasing her like, oh, well, what are you doing tonight? We can go out to dinner tonight. It'll be so much fun. Oh, you're not doing anything? Great, so you don't need your car.
Yes, exactly.
I will take your car.
It's all a ploy. He is a smooth talker.
Oh, so much so.
And so, as he kisses her deeply, as any romantic comedy needs,
yes,
Jerry turns to the camera and says, isn't he just a bit of terrific?
Yes. Perfectly blocking them, too, from frame. Which I like both the comedic timing, the, Porky the Pig ending the cartoon style.
Yeah.
And also, fully blocking the romance from the movie.
Well, and on top of that, people thought it was a little bit of a weird scene.
I mean, sure.
But Lemon mentioned that he didn't really feel like he broke the third wall. He looked away to the side of the camera, which he called just an inch off.
Yes.
So he is talking to himself, but he's not looking directly at us.
Yes. Which
is important. So, the duo is now at a garage where there is a group of mafiosos who are on edge.
And they're mafiosos, because they've got an Italian accent.
And they're playing cards in a parking garage.
In suits. And a bunch of them look straight up like Crabbe and Goyle from Harry Potter 1.
Yeah. And so they're just, hey, we're here for the car.
Please don't kill us.
They have the mechanic help them, which shows how even more terrible Joe is. Because he's like, how are you paying it? Put it on Nellie's tab?
Oh, if Nellie's picking up the tab, just fill up the tank.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they were going to put 45 cents worth of gas in.
Yeah.
Which is probably just enough to get there.
Yeah, he's a user.
Oh, yeah.
And so as the car is being filled up, another group enters and puts the original group against the wall. And along with them is Toothpick Charlie.
Toothpick Charlie.
Yeah.
Toothpick Charlie's one of the ones playing cards right now, because
yes.
Spats is one of the ones that walks into the mechanic shop.
Well, at this time, the duo hides.
Like you should.
And as they do that, the mechanic makes a noise.
Like you do in a mob film.
And he gets brought up against the wall, and now Spats leaves the car, accusing Toothpick Charlie of tipping off the cops, and they proceed to execute the logs.
Yep. Which is fairly much exactly how the actual Valentine's Day Massacre happened.
This is exactly why I wanted to get into that, because I am a history nerd still, so...
Sure.
Yeah. For those unfamiliar, this is almost an exact or as far as we know, exact creation of the real 1929 St. Valentine's Day Massacre, in which 7 members of the Irish Northside Gang were murdered at Lincoln Park Garage.
And for those of you who didn't take an entire class on the mob, so back in ye old day, the Italian mob did run New York and then moved on to places like Chicago and Kansas City. But they needed goons.
Mm-hmm.
So they picked on what at the time was considered the lowest immigrant rank.
The Irish.
Which was the Irish. So while the Irish were not technically part of the mob, a lot of their gangs ended up being the strongmen for the mob. Until
eventually they grew smart and made their own gang.
And also, as time goes on, the people we pick on changes.
Which is, I don't know, it's kind of an interesting part of history, because before the Irish, we hated the Italians.
Which is why we got the mob. Yeah.
Which developed into, now we have the Irish mob, because they were the ones who had to stick together.
Yeah, it's a never-ending circle of mob.
Yeah. And so, in real life, they were actually lined up against the wall, like in the movie.
Yep.
And they were shot by 4 unknown assailants, who were dressed as police officers.
So, minus the police officer uniform, we're pretty much spot on right now.
Yeah. And so this is just a brief summary of the state of Chicago at the time. There's a whole...
I mean, Chicago is its own history. You could go on forever.
Oh, yeah. And so, I mean, there's a lot more rivalry, and that's for another movie. Side little architectural note.
Yes, my favorite.
The garage where the massacre took place was demolished in 1967 and is now a parking lot for a nursing home.
Well, still for cars.
And death.
And hopefully not so much death.
Yeah. The North Wall was actually owned by a Canadian businessman and was on many novelty displays until the bricks were sold and the remaining ones can now be seen at the Mob Museum in Vegas.
Cool.
Yeah.
I mean, we have seen the need for gruesome souvenirs throughout history.
Oh, yeah.
So the fact that they just took apart a brick wall bothers me less than some of the other stories I've heard.
Oh, yes.
So,
yeah,
alright.
So, Suber mentions that in making a comedy, Wilder broke the first comedic taboo.
Mm-hmm.
He said he based comedy around a horrible event.
Yes, and while the time has passed, and I think a lot of people have forgotten about this massacre, especially at the time period, this was huge. This was national news level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And he also mentions that if you are going to show pain, injury, or death, show the cause but not the consequence. Show other characters' reactions but not the victims.
Which, this movie shows everything. It shows...
Well, it doesn't show the events. It doesn't show the actual deaths. It always cuts to the people committing the crimes.
Yes, for most of the shooting, yeah.
I will say, I think this is a very older...
style?
Analysis of comedy.
Okay.
I think it just depends on what humor you're trying to convey. Like, take Ready or Not.
Yes.
The final scene. The only on-death kills that we don't see are the children and the cokeheads' deaths.
Okay.
But what they are able to do with it and why theirs works is because they interlace the horrible events with Grace's laughing.
That's true.
So they are showing the events, but they're showing the response to it instead of just like boom, 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 and then her laughing at the end.
True.
Yeah.
I also think that the way that this movie decided to show because this isn't the only time that people are going to be shot in this comedy for some reason.
Wow.
I mean, it's the mob. Of course more people are going to be shot. But this movie purposefully chose to linger on the overexpression of the characters, which are already caricatures in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And so while, it's not really meant to be a funny scene, it's not taking the mood of the movie in a different direction.
No. It's... And
I think part of it is a stylistic choice. Because that filming, showing that sequences like that where it's a clean cut,
mm-hmm.
There's no transition, there's no, like, play with reflections or emotions or anything quote-unquote artsy.
It just happens.
It just happens. Feels like a lot of the other old movies that I'm familiar with seeing. That was a similar way of showing lots of different reactions.
Yeah.
And so it felt like it fit in the movie in the time period, and it also didn't seem to detract from anything.
Yeah.
Which is kind of hard to do for a comedy film.
Yeah, I mean...
Especially when we just mowed down 7 people.
Exactly.
In front of the 2 main characters.
Well, and what happens to the duo?
Now witnesses.
Because they are found out from hiding in the most childish manner.
Literally squatting behind a car while holding a saxophone and a bass.
Yes.
Couldn't have even putting the instruments down. We're still holding them.
And so they're told to join them.
Yeah.
And they're like, we're just 2 people. We don't know anything.
We gotta go for a gig. It's 100 miles away. We would like to leave.
Yeah. And so,
but as we know, dead people don't snitch.
Exactly. And so before they are murdered, Spats is distracted by Toothpick Charlie, who is still alive.
Gonna call for the cops.
Reaching for a phone, which gives our duo their chance to escape.
Yes.
As the police sirens wail in the background.
And this is the only part of the movie that, for me, I wish had been in color. Because we learn later that Toothpick Charlie's toothpick is gold-plated.
Right.
And you can't tell in the black and white version.
Mm-hmm.
And that is literally the only time in this movie that I missed color. Because I had no idea, and then once they said that, I was like, oh my gosh, that's the over-the-top characteristic that mob boss needed.
And I kind of forgot about it. See, what I think they probably would have done in today's movie is they would give it a little splash of color like they did in Sin City.
Or even just make it hella fucking shiny.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, now our duo is in a conundrum.
Mm-hmm.
Their faces have been seen, and every hood in Chicago is looking for them.
Please also remember that they have no coats in what we can only assume is a brisk spring in Chicago. It's
still
cold.
Winter. It is February 14th.
It's freezing cold.
Chicago is...
It's dead of winter in Chicago.
It's colder than a witch's tit.
Yes, it is.
Yes. And so, side note, I had to look up what a hood is. It just means criminal.
Yes, it does.
And I've looked up a bunch of other 20s slang, so...
I love 20s slang. I love 20s insults, which unfortunately we don't get too many of in this movie.
I want a bunch of, old curses to come back. Like my favorite, may your obituary be written in weasel piss. Or may the devil swallow you sideways.
Oh, so rude.
I love old-timey curses. They are just so... It makes me think of that scene in The Lighthouse.
Yeah.
Hark! That scene.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so while we don't get good curses, we do get a lot of solid slang from this movie.
And now the cross-dressing trip to Florida is seemingly not a bad option.
Yeah, this is now sounding pretty great.
We did forget to mention Jerry is the one who really wanted to go to Florida to cross-dress to begin with. And Joe is the one who is driving Jerry to do everything. He is the friend who has the bad influence.
He is very much the friend with the bad influence.
Yes. And so I just like this because it's not like in some other movies where it's just like, oh, this is going to happen because it's happening.
They fight it the whole way.
Well,
some of them fight it the whole way.
Well, I like it because as a great plot device, it's constructed in a way that the duo had two options.
Yes.
But now they're forced into this specific option.
Yes.
It's not like they have the choice, they are forced into it.
They are forced into it, and I also like that they are forced into it now, and this plot device isn't something that just kind of gets thrown in to get the duo to Florida. This plot device develops itself throughout the rest of the movie. Which I think is so smart.
And I mean, it's also key to a couple of the other themes of the movie.
Yes.
And so with this, Joe makes a call to the agency in a falsetto.
A very convincing falsetto with very puckered lips.
Yes. One thing Super mentions that I think is a great point, and I don't bring this up in a sexist manner to infer that women are weak, because let's be honest, every woman I know could kick my ass.
You are a very small man.
I am. And I'm not very strong either. So, but Super states that when the weaker plays the dominant, it's seen as threatening. Mm-hmm. And when the dominant plays the weaker, it's comedy.
I mean, as much as I know a lot of people that's going to get under their skin, that's how it has always been. And this movie does play off of it, but I think this movie plays off it a little smarter than I've seen other movies do.
Yeah, and there's another movie I know of, and I still kick myself over it because I had a chance to see it in theaters before COVID happened. It's Tootsie.
Oh, yes.
It's on my list to watch, but that's another movie with drag in it.
Yes.
And so now we actually cut to the pair in full drag at a train station, where
boy, do they resemble some of my friends' moms in third grade.
They are having a very awkward time walking in heels.
They are not very tall heels. These are like kitten heels.
And trying to understand how women can walk in them, which...
I also like how they take time to not just bitch about the heels like most movies where a guy has to wear high heels for the first time ever and it's so difficult, woe is me. They cut to Marilyn slipping and weaving through the crowd like a fish.
Well,
while her booty be rocking the whole time, and they're like, "Oh, she's amazing and magical and in heels."
How does she jiggle like this? It's like Jello. I'll get into that in just a second. So, I do want to talk about the costumes a little bit.
The costumes are some of my favorite things about this movie.
I think now is a great time to talk about it because the costumes are designed by Ori Kelly, which I am sure you know his name.
Yes.
I had no clue who this guy is just because
if you're not in the costuming, like, yeah, these people get overlooked.
Yeah, which Ori Kelly was the most prolific Oscar-winning Australian costume designer up until 2014.
Yeah.
And he was overtaken by Catherine Martin.
Which I'm sure other people will know who Catherine Martin is.
Some of his which I did not look her up, so I have no clue who she is.
Well, don't worry, she will come up later.
Okay.
Not in this movie, but in future ones.
Yeah. And so, some of Ori Kelly's work includes Casablanca in Oklahoma.
Which, I mean, solid works.
Yes. Also, I think Ori Kelly is an interesting part for this, or interesting costume designer for this portion, because at the time, he was extremely open about being a homosexual.
Yes.
In a time where Hollywood studios were setting up fake marriages to hide the fact that directors, actors, costume designers...
This movie came out at the end of a time where there was a set of quote-unquote guidelines for movies.
Yeah, the Hays Codes. We talk about it in one of our previous episodes.
Yeah, and so this movie comes out, and while the Hays Codes, for the time period that we're in, specifically for the filming of this movie, they're not strong. They're kind of like weak suggestions. This movie is credited as being one of the movies that, like, killed the Hays Codes.
Yes, well, we'll
get into it more farther. But yeah, the fact that he worked on it, and he didn't just work on it, he was originally just going to do Marilyn's costumes. And then the costumes for the men came in, and they fitted so poorly that he went, no, we cannot have this. And he did everybody's.
Yes. And the other thing with his costuming is that they're simple, but they have minuscule details, and that's what makes it
perfect. Absolutely. So perfect that you don't realize how important that costume is until you think about those two being in any other women's attire at the beginning.
Well, and I've also been thinking about it a little bit too, because Ready or Not has gotten me more thinking about the costumes, and we've been actually tackling some costume-rich movies, and we have more costume-rich movies coming up too. But just it makes me think of, that's really what makes a great character, is not just their performance, but their costumes too,
it changes the whole movie for the audience.
Yeah, because think about it like the stereotypical Final Fantasy Square Enix costumes.
Yeah.
They're over-elaborate, and you can forget a lot of the details.
Yes, they are.
This one, simple dresses, simple costumes, little punches.
But also at the same time, even someone who's not into costuming, watching this movie probably remembers exactly what both of these characters are wearing at this moment.
Yeah.
They got little black heels on, they've got long trench coats, and they both have little short furs pulled up so far up to, like, try and hide what they think is the obvious square jaw, shadow. Yeah. And they didn't bother to shave. They shaved their legs. They didn't shave their chest, which was a choice, gentlemen.
Well...
But this is something that I don't think guys would think of. Because most ladies' clothes, when you're looking at them from a distance, you go, oh, that's not very low cut. Like, because that's what you're used to seeing. But if you have a hairy chest, you don't realize it until after you've bought the clothes and you've already shaved your legs.
Well, as a man who likes deep V's.
Yes.
And is relatively hairless.
Yes.
I do not have this issue. So, like, I forget about it until I remember how hairy my youngest brother is.
Yes.
He has always been a man-child. He has
always been gifted in the hair department. He
is a carpet.
I mean,
he is a walking carpet.
There are people out there who that is top notch.
I'm sorry, Tanner. I love you.
This movie is not for the hairy.
This
movie is for the clean shaven.
Exactly. And so, the costumes, as described in the commentary, again, I have no clue about costumes.
Fair.
They're described as period-ish, with Monroe's costumes not being historically accurate at all.
No, they are not.
But Curtis and Lemon's were.
Yes.
Theirs are actually what women would have worn in the 20s.
Yes, they are. And granted, there is a lot of sway as far as, like what was popular versus what people were truly wearing. But we can assume that, like, this is supposed to be a girls' band, so we can assume that everyone should be wearing something very fashionable.
Yeah.
And you can immediately see the difference between the actual girls' band. They are all wearing practical, much tighter fitting, still period reminiscent pieces.
Conservative pieces.
They are more conservative, but they're girly. They're girly pieces. They're very flouncy, without being revealing. Whereas our two lovely gentlemen friends picked what I would assume my great-grandmother probably wore. These are buttoned as high as physically possible. The knees are covered.
Yeah.
The tights are on in, like, the most traditional way possible. The heels are not too revealing. They're little cute black ones. Nothing fancy going on. And the furs are there because that's what you would have worn.
Yeah.
But they're also not extravagant. The length of the fur, the more drapage you had would have been like, wow, so fancy. But these are cute little, like, practical furs. They are dressed like grandmothers and they're trying to join a cute women's girl band.
I just had another thought to hide other draping.
Yes.
As I make motions on my chest of saggy tits.
I will say, this is another part that this movie, whether or not they thought about this from the beginning, they picked the perfect time period. Because in the 1920s, the fashion was square shoulders, flat chest, and you're nothing too tight. So having big hips, not really desirable. You want it to kind of be loose and unfitting, which for a drag person would be perfect.
And I just realized this is coming into a little bit of modern day. As I have learned from the Transcontinental Tea, hosted by my family friend Emma and her friend Hannah, apparently Gen Z is really pissed off at us for wearing skinny jeans, and they say it's old and we should not wear them anymore. And they are back into 90s bullshit fashion.
Oh yeah, no, 90s are now cool again. I'm very happy because now I can finally live my dream of wearing a choker necklace. I was not allowed one as a child. Also, like, I can't wear things on my neck. Like, I can't wear turtlenecks very well.
Yeah.
And so, like, I'm now hopeful I can buy a cheap one once again from the little coin machine where you get gum, and I can finally put one on. I'm so excited. Also, like, hair clips are back. I'm so excited for hair clips. I don't have enough hair to wear hair clips. I don't know why I'm excited, but I'm gonna get some.
Yeah.
These are things that I'm sure you have no idea about. But I saw the other day a person wearing new, like, the little clips that are shaped like a butterfly. And the girls out there who were forced to wear them in the 90s will know what I'm talking about. Those bitches hurt like hell, but oh my god, they were so cute.
I know what clips you're talking about. I am observant of fashion. I do not participate it as I wear my dope wizard shirt and Super Mario pajama bottoms.
I mean, it is a fashion choice.
It is. I dress like a bub, and I'm okay with it.
That's fine.
So, anywho, back to the movie itself. In regards to the makeup for the duo...
Again, they wore grandma makeup.
But at the same time, supposedly they wore it well enough, like, because they were fussing with it a little bit.
Yeah.
I think it was Lemon who convinced Joe to go into, or not Joe, Tony Curtis.
Yes.
The actual people, not their character names.
Yes, the real ones.
To go into a women's water closet, and no one batted an eye. Which, supposedly they tried it a second time, but around people who knew who they were, like...
Yeah, if someone knows who you are, that's the break. But also, like, I think a lot of people assume that, especially back in the days, people are like, oh my gosh, not the perfect feminine form. I'm going to be found out. Look, I got hands to wash and noses to powder. I don't care how much beard you have. I also have to shave my mustache. Move along, ladies.
The joys of deciding to not have to shave.
I think especially in these movies where the male characters are meant to assume that women are like this imaginary mythical creature. Yeah. Really helps the comedy for this because the guys from the get-go kind of have this like, wow, women are such magical, such jelly-filled creatures of joy. And then we truly get to meet the girls. And the first thing that the conductor says as they join because they lie and they say they're part of conservatory.
Yeah. Or they were at a conservatory.
They were at a conservatory for 3 whole years, which means that they are uptight and stuffy. for this movie.
It kind of makes me think of that whole thing that people of North Korea thought their leader didn't poop.
Yes.
It's that kind of thing where, like,
yes,
I've known women are disgusting creatures just as disgusting as men are.
Yes, but I think there is, and this movie plays off of the old trope of, like, women are held to a different standard, and, like...
They're put on a pedestal.
And, like, because they look nice in public, and they seem polite in public, they must be like that all the time.
Yeah.
And so the first thing that happens when they get on the train is the conductor yells to the rest of the band, "Y'all better be good, because these two are actual ladies."
Well, before that, as we did mention, while the pair are walking up, Marilyn Monroe enters with all of her va-va-voom.
Marilyn's dress attire is clearly not 1920s fashion. It is 1950s all the way.
Well, and another part of her radiance is, during most of this filming, she was 2 months pregnant. Yeah. So she's got a little bit of that extra womanly
You say
pudge.
that. These dresses, I mean, you could have gained 20 pounds and these dresses would hide it. Well, that's what they're for.
They were specifically designed for that, too.
Yes.
And so, another thing of note, while going further into this, despite as beautiful as Monroe is in this movie, the execs thought that her looks were fading, and because of this, there are very few close-ups of her.
Which, she also was struggling a little bit with pill addiction during this movie.
She was high on a bunch of cocktails.
A lot of the time.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate, but unfortunately, especially on the scenes where we do get a bit of a close-up of her, I watched this with a friend, and even my friend noticed the slight cocoa eye, which is what we call being cross-eyed in the opposite direction.
I know exactly which friend this is.
And unfortunately, part of it was because of the cocktails that she was on, she had a really hard time concentrating during this movie. And it wasn't just like, oh, she was forgetting her lines, which she did a lot. But, like, I think just being mentally present was difficult for her during this movie.
She just also had a lot of personal issues that were causing issues.
I mean, we could go into an entire podcast on just Monroe. But, yeah, so there is a lot of reason for her, A, not being the main character, and B, not having the standard Monroe close-ups that we're used to.
Well, and also, just a side little note, this is actually the third to last film she would appear in before her death in 1962.
Yeah.
Also, side little note, as she's walking by, she gets sprayed by steam, which is a nod to the 7-Year Itch, the famous scene where she's over the subway grate and it blows up her chest. Ew.
The most famous Monroe picture of all time.
That was also a co-written and directed by Billy Wilder. Yeah. Same director. Making a reference on himself.
They were friends.
Yeah. And so now the duo is introduced to the band as, well, they weren't friends, but...
I mean, as much as... We'll get into it later.
Yeah. They've introduced themselves not as Joe and Jerry, but as Josephine and Daphne. Because her other name, like, in the agency was supposed to be Geraldine or something?
Yeah, it was Josephine and Geraldine, which was hilarious, but also, like, clearly too comedic.
Yeah.
Like, even for this movie, that was too far, and they went with, I've always liked Daphne. Which is perfect.
Well, which is nice, too, in a prelude to
his character.
Some of the themes as well.
Yeah.
Specifically the transsexual themes of this movie.
Sure.
Where he mentions, I've always thought of myself as a Daphne.
Which, I mean, like, I like that he picked Daphne anyway, because, Josephine and, like, the two Eanes was just too much.
Exactly.
It was too much.
So, Tony Curtis actually based his Josephine persona after his mother, Grace Kelly, and Eve Arden.
You know what? He did a good job, because boy, does the mom energy radiate.
Well, Wilder was not happy with his voice, and they had to redub it later, but this was also due to the fact that Curtis could not carry a falsetto.
I mean, they do make it evident throughout the whole movie that they both struggle with the falsetto the whole movie, and it's honestly part of the comedy.
Lemon actually didn't have that hard of a time.
No, but it's still done in a very comedic way.
It's hard to carry a falsetto, which, speaking of falsettos...
Yes.
I learned Tiny Tim...
Yes.
has a pretty deep voice.
Yes. Okay, if you guys don't know who Tiny Tim is, you need to Google him. Listen to his music. Listen to a couple of his songs. They're hilarious. And then listen to an interview with him. Yeah. It's almost like a different person, and I love it.
To be fair, I've only heard his Tiny Tim voice.
Which, I mean, that was his character that he played. So, yes, of course that's the only one you heard.
Up until this week.
Okay, fair.
I expected him to have a higher voice than he does.
he sings in a very high falsetto. Yeah.
Side note, the only male member of this band is a pervert. He is a creep.
He is a creep. But don't worry, his glasses are stolen very quickly where he can stop creeping.
Yes. And so, now on the train, the pair walk in on Monroe, who is sneaking a little coffee of her own.
She brought her own teeny tiny flask. The cutest little flask you ever did see.
Which makes me think of, my parents got me a flask for Christmas one year. And Micah and I, in our infinite wisdom, we went to go see The Hobbit 3.
Okay, yes, good life choice.
And instead of just filling the flask with booze...
like a normal person?
And trying to mix it in the theater, we decided to try and make a mixed drink in the flask.
Of course, yeah, okay, good life choice.
We were grad students at this time, so...
So how sticky and moldy did your flask get?
Not at all.
Not too bad?
No, we cleaned it out pretty well.
That's good.
Yeah. It made me think of that a little bit, but we are introduced to Sugarcane Kowalczyk.
She's going by Sugarcane, and I assumed that Sugar was the fake name. No, Cane is the fake name.
Yes.
This character's full name is Sugar.
Well, I mean, I had a college professor whose name was King Little.
I mean, that one makes a little more sense. King is a more normal first name. I don't know very many people named Sugar.
He was the coolest professor I've had.
With a name like that, he has to be.
He played Pokemon cards, and our final, he brought a PSP and played it while we took our test.
Dope.
He's what I aspire to be if I was ever a teacher. But anywho.
We learned that Sugar has not just a little bit of a drinking problem, but a lot of a drinking problem.
But we also learned that she is a runaway from a family of musicians, not unlike someone we know.
But we also don't get a whole lot more from the backstory. We know she's running away. Yeah. We know she's got a family of what she calls musicians, and then when she tells you what they do, you're like, oh, mild musician. So we don't know if they just told her no. We don't know if there's more to the running away.
Well, and so some of it might be lost on me a little bit. Sure. Just because she does mention that her father used to play on the SS Baltimore and SS Ohio.
Sure.
The only thing I could find was the SS both real ships.
Yes.
The SS Baltimore was an iron passenger steamship of the German Empire that sailed from 1863 to 1893. Mm-hmm. And the SS Ohio is an oil tanker that was built by Texaco and repurposed to supply Malta in World War II.
Okay. Sure.
Other than that, it doesn't make sense to me, and it just might be something of the time that we're missing. Again, comedy is time-based.
Or her father is in the Navy band.
Who knows?
Yeah, it's hard to say.
But we also there's also a couple other things to glean from this. In this scene, in the commentary, they do mention that at the time Monroe was on a bunch of drugs.
Yeah, she was struggling.
But she was also quite difficult to work with.
Yeah.
Especially since this is really the first scene we have her in. Lemon and Curtis had to act every single scene as if it was the scene because they would take 30 to 40 takes.
And not just like, the one difficult scene, like all of her
Every single scene.
Took almost 50 takes. Yeah, that's too many. That's so long.
Yes, and that's gonna pay off a little bit in the end for the director.
Yes.
Also, it's mentioned by Lemon on a French program called Cinémas. Again, I hate the French language, but whatever. Is not he says it wasn't because she was lazy, it was because she needed to psych herself up.
Yeah.
And that she would quit in the middle of takes because it didn't feel right.
She was a little bit of a perfectionist, and then on pills, it didn't help.
Yeah.
And she had a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, she picked a hard thing to do while doing other hard things.
Yes. While also being an icon of femininity.
And, like, at this point, there was no hiding that Monroe was in this film. Like,
no.
She knew that, like, people were going to come watch it just for her. And yes. I think a lot of that pressure was also not helping.
Yeah. And the commentary does go into a lot of her life. A little bit of it is a little too much for me in the commentary.
There are people who are really into her and her life.
He brings it up just because he felt it was important to talk about it.
Yeah.
And now the duo has become a trio, as they have found companionship in a fellow runaway that they both have the hots for.
Because, of course.
Of course. Even though I am more an Audrey Hepburn kind of man.
I mean, that's why they came in a duo. Was that you could pick. And
yes.
That was kind of the whole marketing ploy.
Yeah, but she is still very pretty in this movie.
She is. And also, the way that her character is written, she's meant to be attractive to everyone. So it would have just been a little questioning if no one else had been, like, if it had just been one person.
Yep. And so, now we have band practice. Where,
band practice.
We learned that Sugarcane is the lead with her ukulele.
And her singing, which she claims is mediocre.
Yes. And as they're practicing, her coffee container slips out, and Daphne covers for her.
Very kindly, because if she had been caught, she would have been kicked out. She would have been on the side of the road in the middle of nowhere in the cold with her ukulele.
Yep. Other little bit of information. Most of the members of the band had to dye their hair blonde, but not blonde enough to match Monroe, so that way she stood out from the rest of them.
Yes, and this was something that my friend and I noted, was like, it was very common to attempt an all-blonde group at the time. Whether that was dancing, singing, music, you name it. Blonde was kind of the, like, default color setting for, like, girl groups. It was not uncommon for girls to dye their hair. It was very, very common. It was also really common for girls to wear wigs.
Yeah.
So, like, my friend did bring up the question and point, like, if Daphne and Josephine had really wanted to, they could have taken their wigs off at any point, and no one would have batted an eye.
Oh, yeah.
People would have been like, oh, you too? Good, I can finally take mine off.
Which is funny, too, because Josephine's wig is brown.
Yes.
And Daphne's is blonde. Just some little thing I noticed. But also, at this time, Monroe was actually showing, and so the way they filmed it, you can't tell she's showing until, like, a couple parts where they cut real quick because she turns.
Yes.
You can start to see the baby bump.
A little bit, but also, like, she's in distracting clothing.
Yeah.
Which is all on purpose. Like, all of her clothing, for every scene where she is front and center singing, is glittery as hell or fringed as hell.
Yep.
Which all helps to disguise everything. And also, like, unless you were a Monroe fan, you wouldn't have known, and thus you wouldn't have noticed.
And I wouldn't have known unless they pointed it out.
Exactly.
But also because she was pregnant, the publicity stills are actually someone else's body with her face,
which honestly,
old-timey photoshopped on.
Old-timey Photoshop, which for the time was a little like, oh my gosh, they did. Nowadays, like, everybody, like, whose body's whose?
We can easily change it. Like, look at that Jason Momoa commercial. I don't know who the string bean is.
I love that one. That's so funny.
Yeah. Also, we learned that the conductor is a hard ass and quite strict of no booze or men, except for this pervy guy.
Who's there because he's the manager? He's the agent?
I don't know.
He does something with the band.
He's there to look at the tits.
Yes.
Yes. Also,
as are Josephine and Daphne.
Yes. Also, how obnoxious must this train ride have been? Because I looked it up. It is a 2-day train trip.
Yes.
With the band practicing on it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, depending on who you were, that might have been entertaining. It's not like you had a phone to doodle around on. You would have had a whole band to listen to.
I mean, it is the late 20s. There's no Game Boys.
There's no Game Boys. There's no
You
cell
got
phones.
Newspapers and books.
And, I mean, books are heavy, so, like, probably only gonna bring 2 of those.
And the empty void that is your mind.
I mean, I think a lot of people were real good at staring out a window in those days.
Yeah.
So yeah, like, I'm sure for some people it was annoying, but, like, it's also not that uncommon. Like,
yeah.
So, it was probably fine. I'm sure the fact that all these girls were making a racket in the sleeping quarter next to other people, I'm sure was annoying, but...
Yeah.
But also, like, we assume they have a whole train car to themselves, so like,
Who knows?
Yeah.
So, and as night descends, Joe keeps talking, or keeps telling Jerry that he has to keep up his part regardless. And
we gotta at least get to Florida, man.
To remember that he is a girl.
You just tell yourself that. No sugar, no butter, no baked goods of any kind. We're on a diet, damn it.
No sugar.
No sugar.
Mm-hmm. And so, as they do this, Monroe slips in to thank Daphne for covering for her. His biggest mistake.
Yeah. Yeah, but also, like, this is the start of the fake fantasy, I think, that this movie, for some people, this comedy scene hits perfectly. Mm-hmm. Because Monroe starts off in the guy's world of what a slumber party is.
Yeah.
She's wearing silly lingerie to bed, and her, like, nightgown is literally, like, see-through and has a boa on the top of it. It's doing nothing. It's not a warm nightgown.
No, it's the nightgown you wear to seduce your husband at night.
Yes it is.
Yes.
Why did she bring it on an all-girls band trip? I don't know. So, like, this is very much starting off as, like, the whole, like, oh my gosh, women are so perfect. A girl's sleepover party is so perfect. And then it immediately turns into a drunken festival where they're all in one bunk. Like 15 people in one bunk bed where they're shaking cocktails in a hot water bottle.
What was it?
And chipping ice with a stick.
There was a movie I was watching for 31 Days of Halloween. I don't think it was this year. I think it was the year before. I think it's just called The Meat Grinder. And there's a scene where this very well-endowed woman is, she comes home and just immediately strips to her skivvies and, lounges for the camera to take it all in.
Uh-huh.
And I think Philip and Brian were over at that point, and they were like, yeah, don't get your hopes up. That never happens.
No.
I'm like, I don't have any illusion that I'm taking the eye candy myself.
Yes. And this movie definitely plays off that joke real hard.
Yes, because
they knew their audience. They knew they were there for Marilyn.
Yeah. Well, and also because at this point, Daphne is trying to, win Sugar over because he decides that they're going to have a couple drinks stealing from Josephine's stash.
Yep. And
waiting to reveal his secrets. But he is stopped because the other women join and...
eventually, 15 people end up in one, like, tiny twin-sized bunk.
Which is great, too, because it's playing into who Jerry potentially really is as a person. He's really becoming one of the girls, so to say.
Yeah.
Side question I do have for you.
Yes.
And maybe you don't have an answer for it.
We'll see.
I've never understood what it is with, like, women sharing beds as, like, a bonding experience, because I've shared beds with my friends and my brothers, but,
yes,
like, it's always just a utilitarian thing of, like, we need to go to sleep.
Yeah, we have this many beds.
Yeah.
Okay, so Marilyn's character, Sugar, makes a note where, like, oh, me and my sister used to snuggle together when we were scared and all that. And I'm sure for some people that is their sibling case.
Yeah.
I would say that for 90% of the rest of the siblings, even if it is, like, a room of sisters, this is not the case. Okay.
Because I've known women who do that with their sisters. I've just never understood it.
There are definitely, like, sister, like, togetherness where it is all, like, everyone is soft and sweet and cute to each other.
That's right. You have a brother. You don't have a sister.
I do not have a sister. I have a much younger brother. And so there is no sweet and kind sister cuddling and fun, like, sleepover time. No. And all of the sleepovers I've ever been to, like, for the most part, are more akin to the stupid part of this scene where everyone's on a bunk bed trying to make things out of a hot water bottle heater because we're desperate and dumb.
Yes.
And someone brought cheese and crackers. That's me, by the way.
Yeah.
This girl's traveling with a box of cheese and crackers in case of a party. I understand that woman.
I just realized for you and Brian not being able to, like, really eat dairy, he brings over a lot of cheese.
Yes, he does.
And dairy products.
Yes, he does. And so, like, I think also just from time immemorial in America, girls being soft and sweet and being able to hug and cuddle on a couch has always been kind of normal. Like, if we're watching movies, there is not, like, a 3-foot rule by any means. Like, if I want to sit next to you and fall asleep on your shoulder, no one gives a shit.
Yeah, I've never understood that with guys of like the spacing the urinals out. To be fair, I mean, I grew up in Europe where like there's a trough.
Yeah.
And you just whip it out and piss.
Yeah. I think part of it is because guys in America, especially in the 1920s and 30s, were meant to be like the rocks and pillars, and there was a lot of stigma around showing any soft and squishy emotions. There wasn't that stigma for women, even in the like lesbian idea. Like that even wasn't like that taboo. Like yes, it was. Like you couldn't do it, but like, oh my gosh, two ladies holding hands, they must be best friends. Like like girls have always gotten a fair pass as far as like if you are a huggy, touchy girl. No one cares. It's not a big deal.
It makes me think of the trials of Oscar Wilde.
Yeah.
Where the Queen said, women don't do that.
Yes.
Yeah.
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 Like, girls have always just gotten a pass as far as that sort of stuff goes. Some girls are that touchy. Not everyone is. So if you are a guy in drag hoping to go to a fun, touchy girls sleepover party, yeah, you might not get the, you might not get sugar. You might get cracker girl.
Yeah, it's just something I forget because a lot of guys here aren't very huggy touchy either.
Yeah,
so.
It's part of the American culture, unfortunately.
Yeah. So Sugar now goes to break the ice, and Josephine...
Literally.
Exactly. Because Josephine is now awake. And
if we're all gonna drink, we're gonna drink together, damn it.
So she goes to talk to Sugar because Daphne is preoccupied in that clown car
she physically cannot leave.
Yes. And so he goes to talk with her, and she's kind of a bit dumb in this scene.
She's I think at this point Daphne's intelligence is meant to be directly linked to how much alcohol she is into. I'm
talking about Monroe.
Okay, sure.
In this part, she's played up to be the ditzy chick.
Yes, very much so.
Where she reveals more that she's not only on the run from her family, but she's also on the run from male bands, where she always falls in love with the tenor sax player, and
always gets her heart broken.
She utters the most boner-killing phrase I have ever heard. Where she says, "I don't know what it is about them, but they just curdle me."
Yeah.
To me,
curdle's not a good word, is it?
Curdling is when your stomach hurts and you take that soul-releasing shit.
See...
That's what curdling means to me.
I have cleaned out many a very forgotten fridge, and so I am very familiar with what a full gallon of unopened curdled milk looks and smells like. And so that is what I assumed, and I went, yes, you put that in the garbage. Just right into that trash bag and right out the door.
Yeah. Also at this point, she said everything she talks about that she hates in a man is exactly what we've seen in Joe.
Yep. She has a type.
Yep.
And it's apparently, according to this movie, tenor saxes. And he is a tenor sax.
Yes. But, yeah. Joe's an asshole.
Yes.
She also gives away that she loves men who wear glasses.
Yes.
I have never heard this, but... I
have. I have heard lots of girls who think guys in glasses are super cute.
Ladies. And so, now we cut back to the cabin, where Daphne is yucking it up with all the other women.
And has, at this point, this is, I think, the part in the movie where she has fully embraced the idea of just being a girl.
Yeah.
Not just in drag, but, like, being one of the gal pals.
Because they start tickling her, or him, and he pulls the brake, or the emergency.
On accident.
And they all tumble out. Which there's like 10 women in this cabin.
So many people in this tiny ass bunk.
Yes.
This is too many. This movie on multiple occasions plays off the whole clown car idea. So yeah.
And so now we cut to a hotel in Miami where the millionaires line up the patio to take in the scenery.
We have just a whole row of creepy old men.
The vast mountains of Florida.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I like this part because we do get the stereotypical group of old men, and then on the end is our one old man that we care about. Our reoccurring creepy old rich man.
Yes.
And he is played by hold on, I know this. He is played by Joe Brown, who, like I was saying earlier, was one of the most recognizable faces in TV and radio comedy.
And I recognize the name, but I never put the two and two together.
Yes, and once you see his face and his giant smile and goofy grin, you cannot forget him. And so the fact that they picked him to not just represent his character, but to represent this entire line of creepy old men at this Florida resort.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Well, they mentioned that we learn everything we need to know about him in 2 minutes.
Yes, we do.
Yeah. More a little bit of architecture trivia. Mm-hmm. The hotel is actually the Hotel Coronado.
Yes.
It's actually
real hotel.
It's actually located in Coronado, San Diego.
Because it's closer to Hollywood.
Yes. Coronado, California, which is just outside of San Diego.
Mm-hmm.
It was opened in 1888.
Okay.
It was the largest single resort hotel in the world.
So, decoration-wise, it fit the time period pretty nicely.
It was designed by Reed and Reed.
Oh, okay, cool.
It has also appeared in 12 other films, and it was chosen because of Monroe's ongoing personal issues, and Wilder wanted her to be able to live on site.
Yes, and honestly...
Or on set, so that way they could just work around her.
Yes, and honestly, like, unless you live in Florida or California and are looking real close, you cannot tell the difference.
Yes, they are both...
They have palm trees, they're in America, there's a beach. That's all I care.
And there's a bunch of old people.
And there's a bunch of creepy old men.
Yes. And so, the old perv, Joe Brown's character...
Yes.
Has his sights set on Daphne after she trips, and he mentions how shapely her ankles are.
He helps put her shoe back on because it fell off with his weird, creepy pervert hands.
Well, he is more subtle and we don't see what happens in the elevator.
No.
The bellhop, on the other hand,
The bellhop is the creepiest young man also, to me, and this might have just have been me, but to me and my friend who we watched this together, the bellhop looks like he's like 14 years old.
He is in full teenage...
shenanigans.
Will stick it in anything that will let him mode.
Does it have a pulse? That's
yes.
Good enough.
Yes.
And he does the most, like, cartoony, like, pull and whistle and wink with his bow tie.
Yes,
and
exactly.
It is so over the top, but, like, everyone else is over the top already in this movie. I mean, at this point, we have full Daphne and Josephine in ridiculous drag that we've gotten used to at this point, too.
Yeah.
So, like, him and his bow tie nonsense didn't feel too far off beat.
No.
If anything, you just, like, solidified how, like, obnoxious this child was.
Yeah. And he is annoying Josephine.
He is. He also briefly mentions that in one scene that he has a key to her room. Don't worry about if you lock it. And I went, oh, he actually probably does have a real key to her room.
Yeah.
That's creepy as hell.
He is horribly creepy. He's creepier than Beanstalk.
He is creepier than Beanstalk.
Because...
At least Beanstalk, after the butt pinching, is at least polite enough to go on real dates with people.
Well, so Beanstalk is also almost out of the movie now because once they're in the room complaining, he bursts in, letting them know that his clothes have been stolen. And Sugar comes in as well, inviting them to go swimming, which Daphne decides to join, but Josephine says she'll stay back because
she's gonna take a bath.
Yes. Which reveals that she has stolen Beanpole's clothes.
Yes, because he's a dude with pants and glasses.
Yes. And so, on the beach, Daphne is, still trying to woo Sugar, even though clearly she's not having it. She sees her as one of the girls.
Yes.
And while the band plays with a beach ball, again, 20s, we don't know what they did for fun besides chase a hoop with a stick.
I think that was before
I'm making a joke of how ancient it seems.
Yes.
The ball goes away from them, and
Sugar runs after it.
And trips over Joe.
No, she does not trip over it. Joe flings his leg into her knee and trips her. And then immediately gets up like, oh my god, I'm so sorry.
Which Joe kicked a kid out of that area,
yes,
too.
He did. He totally bullied a child.
And stole his shells.
He totally stole his shells and bullied a child out of his chair.
Yeah.
Yep.
Joe's a dickhead.
Yes. Also, for those of you who, like my friend on the couch, forgot what 1920s swim attire is, don't worry, it is like a small dress. So being in drag in a swimsuit is a lot less difficult.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, because they do. There's an exchange between Daphne and Sugar, who
you could just rent the bathing suit from the desk at the counter.
Yeah, and like they just mentioned, oh, you're so shapely. You have
the perfect 1920s shape, which is a man.
Yeah, it's weird. Makes more sense now that you explain it, because I'm like, all right, most guys want to see it. Hang off the titties.
Not in the 20s. You wanted to be as flat as possible. If you were shaped like a dude, a skinny dude, perfect.
Yeah.
Interesting. That was the look.
Yeah. And so Joe is disguised in everything that
he's just
curdles her.
Yes. He is turned into that sleazy sax person, but with money now.
Yes.
Fake money.
And at this point, he is actually imitating Cary Grant.
Yes, the accent is very, like, out of left field for this movie, because so far we've only had no accent and Chicago, New York mob accent.
Yeah.
And so his accent sticks out real hard, and I like it.
For those who don't know who Cary Grant is, he's a North by Northwest directed by Alfred Hitchcock.
Yes.
He has a very distinct
accent.
Not Sean Connery distinct, but distinct.
It's getting close.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, at this point, he's trying to show off that there's a yacht, and she's blocking his way because...
He's blocking his view of the yacht. Might have tea on the yacht or some nonsense.
No, because when the flag goes up, it's when the cocktails are ready.
Which is so... Like, he is...
It's so fucking pretentious.
But, like, at the same time, it's very clear that neither him nor Sugar actually know what rich people do or talk about, because both of them are blowing rich people fake smoke out of their asses when they talk to each other. Yeah, and it's hilarious. None of the dialogue makes sense, but it's not supposed to.
Yeah, it's like Fitch in Ready or Not, who's very pompous of like, I just can't fly private anymore.
You can't do it,
or can't fly commercial anymore.
Yes,
yeah, it's like, that kind of shit.
Like when asked, like, well, what does the rich people drink? Like, neither of them would know a real answer and would pick the thing that comes to their head. Yeah. Yeah.
And also at this point, like, Sugar for me, as a character in this, seems rather genuine for what she is, because she's very open, and it doesn't seem like she's trying to butter up to him. She's
enamored with him.
Yeah, she's trying to find love, and she's being very open.
And also, at this point, she has admitted that she's been interested in guy bands' alto saxes up until this point, and they've been horrible to her. And while this guy looks the part, he is, as far as she knows, complete opposite. So she's taken her friend's advice to go find a nice rich man to settle down with. Yeah. So, like, you know, he's got glasses for her, check mark. He doesn't seem to have an alto sax, check. He appears to be rich as hell, also check. And he's not 120 years old, check.
She is curdled. Thoroughly curdled. I
don't know.
No, I don't know. It's such a...
I'm glad that one's not still around.
Anywho, so Daphne comes over to see why is taking Sugar so long to get the ball.
And boy, that disguise doesn't work on the best friend.
No, because...
Not even a little bit.
He tries pulling her away, that they're all going in, and
we should go right up to our room and tell Josephine. Tell Josephine
who she's met. And once they get in the room, Josephine is in the tub, to the shock of Daphne.
She's in the tub in the most weird way physically possible. There is a thick layer of bubbles up to her nose, and at no point does she make any effort to, like, pretend to be lounging, because she jumped into a full bathtub full of bubbles. Yeah. Fully in dude clothes.
Well, at that point, it's not revealed yet, because they're having a brief exchange of like, oh that's nice.
Perfect. It's so great.
You are curdled? Okay, good.
I don't think they say curdled that
much. They don't say it. I hate...
You hate the word curdled?
I don't hate the word in itself. I don't like it as a way to describe being turned on by a man.
Yeah. Curdled is a strong choice.
Again, the soul relieving shit. But, yes. So, there's actually a couple trick shots here, which is nice. Because the whole conversation while Sugar's in the room, it's from the perspective of the doorway. Yes. And then the reveal is while Daphne's bitching to him. Yes. it cuts to behind him where the walls have been removed, and he stands up.
In all his wet clothes.
Yes, and that's the reveal.
Yes.
So, while they're having this call, or while they're having this chat, there is a call. The millionaire perv has, inquired for Daphne's company on his yacht, which Joe arranges for Daphne to be on land so he can use the yacht.
Ta-da! Isn't it so convenient?
To woo Sugar.
I mean, granted, this is a more elaborate pretend I'm rich scheme than some movies I've seen, so I'll give it props for, like, somewhat realistic pretending I'm rich, like, to get the girl fakeness.
Exactly.
This is believable as far as this movie goes.
Yeah. And so, now we have the second song of the movie where Monroe appears in her, what's called the nude dress.
Yes.
Also, despite this being referred to as the nude dress color-wise, the black one she wears later on is actually more revealing.
Yes, it is.
Also,
my friend and I called this one the nipple dress.
So,
boy howdy does it bring attention to the nips.
Also with that, the reason her breasts are very much floating, similar to the maid in Clue,
yes,
is because the bra was actually worked into the dress. Ori Kelly designed it so that it was supporting and she had the gravity-defying features.
Yes, this dress also is based off of a bra shape that we're not very familiar with seeing anymore.
Yes.
It was popular at the time. It's not quite as defined as the bullet bra, which everyone's familiar with, but it was very
torpedo-esque.
It's very pointy boob.
Yes.
There's a lot of boob.
Yeah.
It's very in-the-way boob shape. You're gonna hit those boobs on a door frame if you turn too quick.
Yeah. Side note I learned from this movie, or from the commentary, she did actually do nude photos under a different name.
I mean, you do you, girl.
I have done the research. Very nice.
They are out there, huh?
They are out there.
They're out there.
It is not hard to find.
I'm sure they're not.
And so she is looking in the crowd for her millionaire, but alas, he is not there.
He didn't come to listen to her sing. How rude. However, my favorite creepy old man is out there, and he is smiling and waving at Daphne.
And he has sent flowers.
Not just sunflowers. Like 100 white roses in a giant-ass basket. This is a very expensive gift.
Which he is fully embracing his role still, because Joe tries to take them. Yes. And I completely understand, because I would like to be given flowers every now and then.
Yeah, they're delightful. It's one of the best gifts you can be given.
I just can't have them because my cats will destroy them.
Yeah, and a lot of, like, nice flowers are a little poisonous.
Yeah.
Yeah, not worth it.
Yeah.
We'll get you a flake one later.
They'll still destroy it.
But that one won't kill them.
It might.
Less likely.
Yeah. But, so, Joe steals the white roses to...
immediately puts a card in it for Sugar.
That he can't make it, but he is waiting for her on the yacht. And so begins the rush to the yacht. So,
he steals a bicycle, because, of course, Sugar... At first, my friend and I were like, wow, Sugar does a really quick change for, like, an outfit, because in our heads, we recognized what outfit she was wearing, but then when she runs out of the building, she has a big white fur on. So it was hard to see what dress she was wearing. And we assumed, as ladies, that she would have gone up to her room to put on a different dress.
Yeah.
Not thinking for an instance that the dress she was already wearing was perfectly acceptable for a date night. So we're sitting here like, wow, that was really fast. She jumped into a different outfit hella quick. And then, like, she gets to the boat and both of us were like, oh, she just grabbed a fur.
Yeah.
Never mind.
She went and changed, which is great use of parallel action because Joe probably had plenty of time.
Yes.
To get changed because, guys, change like that.
Put a jacket on, you're good.
Gets to the boat, taunts Daphne.
Yes.
And the pervy millionaire. And then she shows up on the boat.
Yes.
There's plenty of time.
And at this point, poor Daphne is being the best wingman possible and has decided that she's going to do what she can to convince this creepy old man that they should just stay on land. She'll get boat sick. She gets seasick so easily.
Yep.
They can have a good time here.
And also on the boat, Joe continues his millionaire bullshit.
Oh my gosh, this is the part where the like just word vomit continues, and I like it though, because if he had said like proper smart people talk, it would have broken the illusion.
The gag about the sailfish being a sardine, they just shrink up in the can.
This is amazing. They get it into that little can. Which,
Sugar's a little bit dumb.
I think the jokes that Sugar makes are meant to I think Sugar's character is supposed to occasionally say dumb things because she knows that she is supposed to be a dumb person.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Makes sense. And so now she begins her own seduction.
Because Joe has woven this bullshit story about his heart being broken.
Yeah. And he can never love again.
And like the only cure that could possibly rouse his stone dead heart is kisses from a beautiful woman. Maybe then that would stir him.
Yes. And yeah, they embrace. They just
spend the entire night kissing on a boat. Wow.
Kissing.
Yeah, according to Sugar, that's all they did.
To be fair, it's a 50s movies. By today's standards, there would be a steamy love scene.
Oh, for sure. But I kind of like that they spent the whole night just doing silly kissy nonsense, because like it adds a level of innocence to Sugar that like maintains throughout the movie, which I like, because we cut then to Daphne. Who is having the time of her life. No. Well, at first. At first
she is not, because the perv is saying that she keeps leading
in the dance, which is annoying, but also, like, Daphne is much taller than this old man. And I have taught ballroom dancing. And yes, the lady is supposed to let the man lead. But it's so much easier to lead if you're the tall individual. Regardless of which party you are.
I also have learned through friends and family that men are quite intimidated by tall women.
I mean, I can see how. You have to look up.
I mean, I have talked to your husband about this too, and yes, he is intimidated by taller women, but like...
He's also, though, very tall, and like most people who are taller than him in general are just intimidating people.
Yeah.
I think there's a height limit where you're like, alright, now your head's scraping the ceiling. You have reached giant status.
Yeah, and I mean, he is quite a bit taller. Like, all the guys I've talked to, like, they're like, maybe a couple inches and I'd be fine. I'm like, I'd be fine if she was a full foot or two taller than me. That's fine.
I mean, I think it's just personal preference, but it does crack me up, because, like, I spent a lot of time trying to teach children the very basics of ballroom for a couple of years as part of the cotillion program.
Yeah.
Which was fun, and I enjoyed it. But yes, especially for like, kids, because girls get tall so much faster than guys do. And so, like, they can see where they're going, and most of the girls wanted to be there, and the guys were there because their mom made them be there.
Yeah.
And so the girls wanted to dance, and they wanted to do the twirls and the spins and, like, all of the fancy moves that we taught them, like, 2.
Yeah.
And of course they want to do those, and so... And they're in a dress, they want to look good. The guy's there because he has to be. And so, yeah, we spent a lot of time being like, no, ladies, like, I know you want to spin all the time, but you have to let him decide when to do that. Or at least, like, talk about it.
Use your words.
Most dance partners, like, have a routine or some prompts for when they want to do stuff.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we cut to Daphne being complacent at best.
Yeah. And then
she's there. Yeah. Having some type of fun.
And then we cut back to...
More kissing.
More kissing and a little brief exchange of his heart's not warmed enough yet.
It's so stupid. And then we cut... But I like it because we can see that their progression is mild.
Yeah.
Both of them know this is a joke and they're playing along with it, I think, at this point.
They're both looking for something to be warmed.
Yes. Whereas we don't get as much screen time, and we get no dialogue with Daphne's cutscenes.
Yeah.
But as Daphne's cutscenes progress, we go from very grumpy and leading to, okay, maybe this is a little fun. It's still stupid, I hate it though. To, no, this is a fun time, I'm having the time of my life.
Fully embraced it.
Like, we're gonna dance the night away, the band is for some reason blindfolded.
Yeah, no, exactly. That was like my biggest question of like all of them.
But I think, okay, the only thing I could think of was they have blindfolded the band because they are now the only people still dancing. it's probably like 4 a.m.
Yeah.
And the band is tired and would like to leave, but if they're blindfolded, they don't know how many people are still there. They also don't have to look at Daphne doing whatever the cha-cha was.
Whatever that is.
But they are having the time of their lives.
Yeah.
And also, like, they have danced the night away.
Yeah. And so, in this scene, when they were screening it for the dailies, a lot of the cast and crew was asking Curtis what it's like to kiss Monroe.
Yes.
There have been a couple responses.
Okay.
The one that's spread around is that his response was, it was like kissing Hitler.
Rude.
Now, again, there are conflicting stories on this bit.
Sure, of course.
Supposedly, Curtis gave multiple people just because, like, he was... It was kind of indifferent to it.
I'm sure he also got tired of being asked.
Yeah. And so, I think the reason the Hitler line stuck is because of her difficulty to work with.
Okay, yes. And like, at this point, it was well known that she was kind of a pain.
Yeah, and people thought maybe he was just frustrated with her, but in actuality, he's like, I would kiss Monroe.
It's fine. We were acting, and like, meh.
Yeah.
Meh, stop asking.
Yeah. And so, Joe sneaks back into the hotel room where Daphne is playing the maracas in bed.
Still dancing the night away.
Because she is engaged.
This is the detail that I really appreciate about this, is Joe then goes through and is like, well, you can't get engaged. And she goes, oh, well, we've thought all this through. We've talked about his mom and how she doesn't like smokers. We've talked about where we want our honeymoon. They didn't just dance the night away. They talked.
They planned their life.
They planned, like, this wasn't like I was having fun and it could have been anybody. They, like, connected.
Yeah.
They planned the whole thing. They stayed up till literally the next day. She hasn't slept yet, and the sun is up again.
Yeah.
And Joe is like, no, think about this. She's like, no, we'll work.
Why are you even getting married? For security.
But also, like, this is one of the aspects of the movie that I do like that they address, because one of the old-timey jokes for girls was, you either marry because of love and you're going to be poor, or you marry for security so you're going to get an old dude. And you're probably not going to love him, but, like, he'll die soon, so don't worry about it.
He's got the money. He's
got the money, and if it really doesn't work, you can divorce him and then get alimony checks for the rest of your life. And that was, like, legitimately people's plans.
Yeah. So also at this time, well, I mean, they talk about that too. He's like, well, how are you going to do the honeymoon? And that's when he brings up, well, I'm thinking Cancun, but he wants or he wants somewhere else.
Yes.
And he's like, but you're a boy. After telling him the whole movie, remember, you're a girl.
Yes. But also, like, he's thought that through too. He's like, well, yeah, but, like, I'll tell him after we've already said the I do's, and then we'll get an annulment, and I'll get rich, and it'll be fine.
Yeah. And also a little bit for this, they actually had to reshoot it, because originally there weren't pauses in it.
Yes.
And they weren't sure what he was going to do with the
maracas.
Yeah.
Fair. I also don't know what he did with the maracas.
But they're comedically timed perfectly.
They are. They're fantastic.
Yeah. And so, while they're going over it, Sugar bursts in, and Josephine has to hide the fact that
she's Joe.
Yeah.
So, of course, jumps into bed and pulls the colors up to her nose.
Which is what they did in the...
Yes, it's a classic trope.
Tub.
Yeah, it's a classic trope.
And so, this other side thing that I hate in this part is, I mean, it's the terminology of the time.
Sure.
Beau.
You don't like the word beau?
It is the modern version of bae, but with more letters.
Yes. Yes, it is.
It has one more letter.
Yes, it does.
It's the same bullshit. I hate it. But
it literally, like, that is a good translation. Bae, beau, literally the same word.
Yeah.
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 But I don't know. I think even back then, I think beau was already kind of a, like, 1920s word. Like, I think it had already fallen out of, like,
I mean,
full fashion.
The movie's set in the 20s. So,
I know, but like the 1950s audience who was currently watching it would have been like,
would have been old-timey.
Aha, an old-timey word that I know. My parents said that word.
Oh god, I can't wait. I'm not looking forward to movies set in the mid-2010s.
They are gonna happen sooner than you think.
Well, anywho.
Yes.
While she's telling them the good news, who bursts in but the bellboy carrying Beefeater Gin?
Oh.
That label has not changed.
No, it has not.
And so, while everything is going well, whose shadow shall grace the hotel?
But our dear friend Spats is back.
Spats.
Because you forgot this was a mob story, didn't you?
As Walt Disney said, just when everything's fine, always bring back the Wicked Witch.
Yes. Spats makes a good Wicked Witch.
Yes.
With his, strangely, a New York Italian accent.
Yeah. And so they are there for Italians who love opera.
Which is the best code name for mob gathering of all time.
Yes. It's as clever as Mozzarella's funeral parlor.
So stupid. I love it. And of course we need the head boss to make an appearance.
Yeah. Well,
we now have been told that that's what they're here for.
And there is a cop who has tailed them.
So in other words, this is a mob boss convention.
Yes. And so Joe and Jerry, who are, as far as we know, are supposed to be there for a few more shows.
Yeah, they got like another week or so. Time to pack up and leave.
They see Spats and they're like, "Oh shit.
Time to run."
So while they're packing, Joe calls Sugar to break the news. And
as Joe.
Yes. Or sorry, not as Joe. As the millionaire.
As the son of Shell Oil Company.
Yes.
Because that was the only rich oil company he could think of.
Well, it played off into the fact that he stole the shells from the kid.
Yes.
And they named it after the fact that his family loved collecting them.
Which is not how Shell has actually been named, just in case you were wondering.
I didn't bother to look it up.
Me neither. But I guarantee that's not it.
Yeah, and so, after that, Sugar breaks in, or barges in, crying.
She's having the worst time ever.
This scene, they harped on how difficult it was for the little bit she says. It apparently took 44 takes, and to get it to work, they had to tape her lines to the inside of the drawer, where she grabs the bourbon, which apparently there's a couple other scenes where you can see her reading the lines.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and like once you know it does kind of, you can tell.
Yeah.
But if you watch this movie without knowing any of Monroe's life story, you will miss all of these bits.
Yeah. No,
you will miss the fact she's pregnant. You will miss the fact that she is having trouble concentrating for the whole movie, despite the cocoa eyes.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe the cocoa eyes give it away. But, and you will miss the fact that she struggled very hard to remember lines.
It's like that dude in Jaws, the old drunk sailor guy who got completely plastered and like half the scenes his face is beat red and then the other is just like normal.
Yes.
Yeah. And so now the end is coming, and actually happens quite quickly.
Yeah, the rest of the movie really picks up.
Because we cut to the mobsters as they're planning to now kill little Bonaparte.
Okay, so to make it a little bit more obvious, there's like a bunch of gangs here, but there is now a head boss who is planning to kill Spats.
Yeah.
And there is Spats who is planning to kill the mob boss whose name is Little Bonaparte.
Yes.
Why is his name Little Bonaparte? No idea. It has nothing to do with his, like, distinguishing feature.
Well, supposedly he's slightly based off Capone.
Yeah, okay, yes, and Capone was hard of hearing. Capone did not carry around a giant walkie-talkie attached to his ear.
Hearing aid. Old-timey hearing aid.
Yes, it is a old-timey hearing aid, and it will take the modern audience a second to understand what it is, because it looks a lot like a Walkman to me.
Yeah, it looks like a handheld radio.
Yeah, with one earpiece.
Yeah.
But like they do make it clear throughout the movie, like what it is. You don't have to Google it or anything to figure it out.
It just takes that quick second.
Yeah, but like I don't know if the normal audience would know that he's supposed to be based off of Capone. Other than the fact that Capone is one of the few mob bosses people know.
Yeah. It makes me think of, like, I've been watching the Ringu collection.
Yes.
And I'll have to explain to nephews and nieces what a VHS tape is.
Yeah, I think maybe a little less so than, like, what an old-timey hearing aid was, because, like, ain't nobody used those things.
Yeah.
They looked bulky as hell and super inconvenient, and I'm sure people only whipped them out when they needed them.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, the mobsters recognize Joe and Jerry, still in drag.
Because they chose to climb down the balcony that the mobsters are using.
No, they're not in drag at that. No, they still are because they're trying to sneak out.
They still are.
Yeah, that's right.
And granted, this is the one scene where the mob goons actually say something intelligent. This is the one line of intelligence through the whole movie. Because they watch dames climb down their banister to escape with their instruments with a saxophone and a bass, and one of them goes, hey, those are dudes.
Yeah, they're the only ones who recognize them. I mean, they were suspicious to begin with, but
now they are even more suspicious.
Yeah, and so now we start in our first
full chase scene.
Scooby-Doo-like chase, as I'll refer to them.
It is a delightful Scooby-Doo-esque chase scene.
To the point where the pair gets away, and they hide under the tables of the meeting of the lovers of Italian opera.
And whose feet might pop underneath right next to them?
Spats.
Because ain't nobody wearing those except that man.
Which we now also know Spats is in a little bit of trouble himself because...
he let them get away.
Twice.
Yeah, he shouldn't have said that second time.
Yeah. And in the meantime, we see someone hiding away in the cake.
With a Tommy gun.
That is wheeled in as Happy Birthday is sung because his birthday is 2 months away.
Which is, what's a couple months between friends? Which I am now going to just start making my friends cakes. Because I want cake. And I can't eat a whole cake by myself. And so y'all gonna start getting 2-month pre-birthday cakes.
Yeah,
because what's a couple of months between friends?
Well... this year I am realizing I should not plan my birthday because someone gets a bit annoyed at us when we plan our birthdays. Because you started doing the same, you started planning your birthday last year too.
I've always planned my own birthday though.
Yeah.
And I have to inform my delightful husband that if I would like a surprise party, I would like it on this day, this time. And here's a couple ideas of what should be, what would be appropriate surprise places to go to.
Yeah. And so, as the cake's reeled in, a man pops up, and like a shitty stripper...
just mows them down. And so, now Joe and Jerry are witnesses again. And do they wait for the mob to leave? Because their cover's not been blown yet.
No.
The mob people haven't slid under the table, no one's gonna come and look for them. They just panic and are like, oh shit, we gotta leave. So they bust out, and the entire mob convention now goes, get them.
And there are 2 gangland killings. The taboo has broken twice.
Yes.
And so, on their way out, they call the pervy millionaire to help them escape by yacht. And while they're running, Joe takes a minute to stop and talk to Monroe.
He doesn't
or Sugar.
Doesn't stop. I think he's still dressed as Daphne too, or Josephine. He's still dressed as Josephine.
Yes.
Walks up on stage while she's singing a sad song about how her heart has been broken again. Kisses her as Josephine. And is like, all right, I gotta leave, bye. And she's like, I'm coming with you.
Yes, the lesbian kiss. Because now she realizes, that's not a woman.
Also, at this point, Josephine's attempt at being a girl is real weak at best.
Yeah.
Mostly just wearing a fur coat.
I mean, they're running.
They are running from... But granted, and they do make an effort to show that they have learned how to actually function in small heels, because they are full-on running in heels.
Oh, yes. And now they are getting away. Sugar is chasing them down as they get to the boat. And Joe and Sugar reunite in the back of the boat. While Jerry tries to let Osgood down lightly. Osgood is the pervy millionaire. He does have a name.
He does have a name. I prefer pervy millionaire.
Yes.
But also, as we find out in the end, maybe not quite as pervy millionaire. Because, and here's my argument.
Okay.
So, he's made it well known that he has married several ladies.
4.
He's married 4 ladies in the past. He's also made it very well known that he just wants to be a sugar daddy.
Yeah.
He wants someone who's cute, with shapely ankles apparently, who can dance the night away with him whenever they want.
He is the reason we think of, like, in the old-timey times, of having to cover your ankles.
Yes. This is the man that you wear tall socks for.
Yes. Who, he's probably into that, too.
Oh, I'm sure. There is no stopping it. But he makes it very clear, like, what he is interested in. At no point is he ever lied to Daphne about what he is interested in.
Yeah.
And Daphne also hasn't lied to him about what she's interested in. She made it pretty clear multiple times that she's not interested in him as, like, a friend or partner, but, like, you do have money.
She's kind of grown into it, because until Joe starts pointing it out, he's in the moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so like, he starts letting him down slowly, saying, like,
we can't be together.
I smoke. That doesn't matter.
Which we've learned that his mother hates.
Your mom won't approve. That's fine.
That's fine.
ultimately to, I'm a man.
Well, and then even farther, I can't have kids. That's we can adopt.
Yeah. And then he's like, I'm a man.
Takes a wig off and everything.
Well, no one's perfect.
And that's how it ends.
Which, originally, everyone was telling Wilder that joke is not going to work.
And it was kind of a placeholder, too. They kind of put it in as like a, we'll think of something better. But they never did. And
originally, on the first showing, it didn't work. Because everyone thought it was going to be like, oh, this big romance scene. But it ends on a comedy movie ends on a joke.
It ends on a joke, and it also ends with the the four faces are two people still kissing in the back, because that is what their relationship is based off of.
Yeah.
An old man grinning ear to ear, happy as can be. And the last emotion that you can pick up off of Daphne's face, even without a wig, is, maybe this isn't so bad. I've found a sugar daddy.
A little bit annoyed still.
A little annoyed, but also, like, there's that smirk of, like, well, I'm not lying to him. He knows exactly what we're getting into.
Yeah.
Let's get them diamond bracelets, y'all.
Well, after the second showing, it actually caught on.
And now it's one of the most famous quotes of this entire movie.
Yeah. So, that's Some Like It Hot.
I love this movie. This movie's comedy for me is spot on. This movie's like time period, the whole package.
Without being gory and violent, this is my kind of humor.
Yes.
Yeah. So I actually really want to talk about the legacy of this movie quite a bit.
Because it's persisted.
Well, and that's something interesting about it too. First off, it seemed like everyone loved working on the film.
Yes.
Despite Monroe being a pain in the ass.
It sounded like everyone genuinely had a good time.
That being said, Wilder did not invite Monroe to a celebratory dinner for the cast and friends afterwards, which...
A little rude, but also, like, her life was not a secret, and so I can see the excuse list that he would have for her.
And I can see why he would be a little pissed off, because she cost the production roughly $500,000 with her delays alone.
Yeah, very difficult to work with.
Which, for a while, left them in a tumultuous relationship. But eventually kind of ended on friendly terms after the blood had settled. And
I think a lot of people in the moment were very frustrated working with her, especially because at this point in her career, it was known that she was kind of frustrating to work with, but like it was always kind of put her acting coach and manager and her husband especially did a very good job of persuading people that it was just like, oh, well, she's a star and she has quirks.
Yeah.
And they did a good job of trying to hide all of the other struggles she was dealing with.
Yeah.
Which honestly she probably should have spent more time dealing with and less time trying to act. But like, it's the water under the bridge now. There's nothing we can do.
Well, Wilder would eventually praise her acting in the role because he said what she produced was worth it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people forget that she actually was a good actress.
Yeah.
This movie was made towards the end of her life, and also during some of the most stressful and troubling times she'd ever had to go through, and she had a lot that she had to go through.
Yeah,
on multiple occasions.
She was finally pregnant, which was stressful enough, which unfortunately she did miscarriage a couple weeks after the film wrapped.
And on top of that, she always had struggles. And again, this is something that, if you like Marilyn and you like her story, there's entire movies based... Yeah, there's multiple books based off of every section of her life. The girl did not have an easy street.
Yeah, there's a rabbit... And even if you just listen to the commentary on this film, he talks about it a lot.
And I think part of the reason why there was the tension originally during filming was... her husband and her acting coach did a good job of, like, brushing a lot of stuff under the rug for her, as far as, like, getting her new spots.
Yeah.
And then, like, then they also put their hands in pies, which annoyed everyone. Because they kept trying to influence things for how they thought it should go.
Yeah.
Because they very much played the I know best role. And on top of other things. But on top of that, like, while she was super well known, she didn't really have the same reputation that we see nowadays with actors, where someone's worked with the same group over and over and over again. You know exactly who you're going to be working with.
Yeah.
You know what kind of person they are. You know whether or not they're going to be friendly or hard-ass or quiet and reserved.
Yeah.
This was kind of a little bit of a different time. You either worked with the same people all the time and you knew who those were, or you were working off of solely rumors and you didn't know who you were going to get.
Yeah.
And Monroe, unfortunately, was more in the rumor category.
Yeah. She's a complex person, but...
She was, and I think a lot of people weren't ready for that.
Yeah.
And after everything ended, people realized, like, what she accomplished while working on this film.
Yeah.
And also, I think a lot of people were worried this film wasn't going to do well. And so when it did do, not just well, but very well, people were like, all right, well, it was worth it.
Well, in different regards. So it was very successful worldwide. And as we mentioned earlier, the 50s was a very conservative time, and this movie was on the cusp of the prevailing ideals of decency, where we had the very tumultuous social changes that were to come in the 60s.
Yes. This was on the cusp of the whole idea of, like, if there is a bedroom scene, both feet are on the floor.
Yes.
Sort of, like, that's
There's 2 beds.
There's 2 beds for a marriage couple, and, like, if there's a kiss scene, that man's feet are both on the floor, knees facing forward, no funny business, 6 feet for Jesus.
Like a middle school dance.
Yeah. Rulers width apart, people.
And, I mean, the changing of times also could be potentially related to Project MK Ultra, but that's a different movie and a different rabbit hole.
That is a different deep dive.
Some Like It Hot was actually condemned by the Catholic League of Decency,
which is how you know it's a good movie,
as morally objective before it even hit the silver screen.
Yeah, which again, how you know it's a good movie.
Well, they claimed it promoted homosexuality, transvestitism, and lesbianism.
Again, that's how you know it's a good movie.
I went a little bit of a rabbit hole on this. Very minor rabbit hole.
I mean, you could go a lot farther if you wanted to.
The Catholic League of Decency was actually founded in 1933, and they changed their name in 1965 to the National Catholic Office of Motion Pictures, or NCOMP.
As a terrible acronym.
Yes, for short. And then in 1980, they stopped operation at that point, they had rated 16,251 feature films.
You know, I mean, for the people who care, like, about that, like, I do think it's important to have some basis of rating, and there wasn't, like, people like us who just sit around and talk about movies on the internet.
Yeah.
So, like, I get it. But again, their idea of what an appropriate movie would be like Winnie the Pooh. They
have a whole rating system, and that's another thing we can get into at someday. But some of the films of note that are condemned, more recent ones that I'm familiar with, A Clockwork Orange.
Of course, A Clockwork Orange is condemned.
Hell yeah. High Plains Drifter.
Again, yeah, of course.
The Wicker Man. The original 70s Wicker Man.
I can see why on multiple reasons. Because I can see how it's stepping on some toes because there are some Catholic-based religions in the Wicker Man that are, like, played off of as part of the cult.
Yeah, there's a fucking orgy scene in the beginning.
I mean, yes, that scene also.
But other couple, The Omen, which my mom absolutely hates that movie.
I can understand, but it's also good.
And Dawn of the Dead.
You know... You can't have reanimated corpse in Catholicism. There's only one, and his name is Jesus.
Yes.
The ultimate zombie.
Or Lazarus, too. One of the Lazaruses.
Yeah, okay. So there are a couple.
There's a couple.
Not many. Less than 5, I think.
But now I kind of want to go through their condemned films and watch them myself.
You're just going to take their list and go one by one?
Yes.
All right.
At some point.
You let me know about that.
The film was completely banned in Kansas City, or Kansas State.
That does not surprise me at all.
Not at all.
I wouldn't be surprised if you told me Kansas still has that movie banned.
Saying that they were not ready for that kind of movie.
That is a correct statement.
In Memphis, Tennessee, it was rated adults only for not removing that steamy boat scene.
Out of all the scenes that are steamy, yes. The boat scene, alright, fine.
Yes, and so, yeah, it made a little bit of a wave.
It made waves, but
it historically wasn't, it was successful, but it wasn't like the hit it was today. Like, it had that little bit following, and then it gained somewhat more of a cult following to the point where In 1988, it was actually considered part of America, or the American Film Institute's top 100 greatest American movies.
Yes.
And even then, that still persists to today. In 2001, it was voted #1 funniest movie of all time by the American Film Institute.
Yep.
And in 2017, it was voted best comedy film of all time in a BBC poll of 253 film critics from 52 countries.
And then on top of that, I think it's in the Library of Congress as an example of time period and of comedy.
Yeah. To be fair, it was up for a bunch of awards.
6 whole academies, I think.
That year, though, it competed against Ben-Hur at the Oscars.
Oh, that's rough.
Not that I give any real merit to award ceremonies, but...
Oh, yeah, no, I fully think they are rigged, but, like, it's nice to put on the resume.
Ben-Hur was nominated for 12 and won 11 of them.
That's a lot!
Since then... The only 2 other movies share that same title. As of, I think, 2017. Titanic and Lord of the Rings.
My favorites.
Lord of the Rings, Return of the King specifically.
Yes, because, of course, that one.
Yeah. And so, also, check out our 2-part series on the Titanic. Little plug there.
Yes, please. There was so much research done.
There was a lot of research done for this. This outline is about as long as the Titanic one.
It was. Oh, Monroe. You make it so long.
She makes something long. Sex jokes. So, Some Like It Hot was actually also adapted into a Broadway musical called Sugar.
Sure, why not?
Opened in 1972. Quite a bit way from 1959.
That's a gap.
Had 505 performances and toured the country as Some Like It Hot.
You know what? 500 plus performances, that's kind of a lot.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
That's successful.
That's pretty good.
So, one thing that stuck with me while rewatching Some Like It Hot was something that Suber mentioned during his commentary.
Uh-huh.
And that was, what can be removed from a movie and not be missed?
Okay.
This whole movie, there is not a wasted line of dialogue.
No. And I would argue there's not a wasted scene.
Yeah.
And by scene I mean background character, piece, film, setup, set, the whole package. Every single second of this movie is full of something important. Not necessarily important as far as plot goes. I mean, a lot of it is, but important to either character development, world building, or just the joke in general.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and so there's some other things he mentions. I'm going to rely a little bit heavy on his commentary for this last little bit.
Sure.
He also brings up that comedy is not trivial, but comedy trivializes.
Yes, I think he put the nail in the coffin for this movie.
Yeah, and for someone who, like me, who is not versed in comedy, which I've talked to my buddy Austin, and I'm going to start studying it a little bit more because
there's a nuance to it for sure.
There is. That quote actually hits deep with me because Some Like It Hot is, I mean, it's somewhat graveyard humor before it was popular.
Yes.
I mean, look at what the lads from the last podcast on the left have done.
Or just most American humor in general has started to lean more dark.
Yeah, exactly. Our humor is getting very much more British.
Yeah, definitely.
But back to Some Like It Hot, Wilder and Diamond took taboo subjects, even of the time, like cross-dressing, and made it into something that we don't even blink an eye at.
That's true. And I think they also did it in a way when the movie came out to make it I don't want to say accessible, but they made it, even though it's the main plot point of this movie, it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
Like, the cross-dressing part, while the butt of most of the jokes, is done in such a way of being both self-aware but also forward-thinking for the time period.
Well, and there's a couple things to that I'll get into in a second. One thing that Subaru also mentions is that what makes a movie last is character, and character.
Yeah, I mean, location.
And that is what Some Like It Hot has in droves.
Oh, fully. Even the background characters have character.
Yeah, even all the sets have character. Like, Mozzarella's funeral parlor.
And even the goons, even though, like, some of them literally only have one line, and some of them don't have any lines. Yeah. They're just on screen for me to look at their dumb hats and their giant ears. They still have character.
Yeah,
They are still a caricature of themselves.
Yeah, and so, for me, I've been thinking about this quite a bit, because we did an anti-romance movie, and now we've gone into...
a full romance. This is a romance movie.
We're not just a romance, a rom-com.
This is an OG rom-com.
And for me, I've been thinking about it a little bit. Again, not a genre I'm super familiar with, but my thoughts on why the rom-coms fail. Mm-hmm. And it's something... Or
at least are more nuanced, I think, than they could be.
It's something Suber said that maybe he wasn't trying to get at, but it clicked with me. He said, sex is funny and not love.
Yes.
And so...
I think 90% of the rom-com movies, I think he's right.
Well, and so for me, most of the rom-coms I've watched, generally the bad ones.
Sure.
About half or 2/3 of them start off comedic and then they get serious.
Yes.
And that's where they start to fail, is because they get serious. Whereas, like, this movie, it's serious is still comedy.
Yes, it is a comedy movie first.
Yeah.
And the romance happens to be in there. Yes, and I think rom-com, much like horror, is one of those genres where they are expected to produce a vast amount of films.
Yeah.
Because the audience for it is there and they will consume them regardless of quality.
Yeah.
However, I do think that this style, where the comedy and the romance, and I would argue that there is a love story in this movie, even if it is a little obscured, and it is arguably the background love story to Sugar and Joe.
Yeah.
I would argue that it's there, and I mean, it's made front and center at the end.
Yeah.
I think that format is starting to come back in some of the pieces that people are recognizing as being rom-coms on a different level. One of the movies that comes to mind for me is Date Night, where it is a rom-com, but it takes its comedy first, and it takes its romance second, and it takes its romance not in the star-crossed lovers sort of way, which even this movie makes fun of, because the star-crossed lovers are in the back and we don't care about their ending. We care about the love in the front seat.
And I'll say our star-crossed lovers aren't Joe and Sugar.
No. Arguably, Joe and Sugar will break up in a week, and no one will be the wiser.
It's Osgood and Jerry.
Which,
and so that's the other thing too, is like this movie, why it's weird that it's successful. It's the same thing as Back to the Future.
Yes.
Where there really is no... The characters are the same at the beginning as they are in the end.
There is no character development, arguably with one very tiny exception of Daphne's development and acceptance of being a girl.
Yeah, or maybe that they're more open to it because they really embrace the role. But even then, that's a very superficial. There's no deep character.
No, they're like they don't talk about it at any point. At no point is like they're a moment of connectiveness, which I think a lot of, like, especially Hallmark style rom-coms where there's a like connected scene. I think the true rom-coms that not only do well originally, but like become cult classics to the point of this movie, they don't need a connective scene because that's not part of this movie. That's not part of how people watch romance movies.
Yeah, no,
people are going to project their own love style onto the characters. So why not just make them the comedy character first, the thing that's harder to project?
Yeah. No, I mean, there's a reason this is so beloved by everyone. Or a lot of people, not everyone, but
I think a lot of people, especially, I think this movie is loved, especially in the comedy world, and I think it is loved secondly by the Monroe group.
Yeah.
Which honestly takes up most of the mainstream audience.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't even remember why I watched this one in the first place. I think... Oh, no.
This movie comes on occasionally on TV.
I know why I was going through it. I was going through a period where I was going through classic Monroe and Hepburn movies.
Yes.
Because I knew of them name-wise, but I had never seen anything they were in.
And that kind of brings me to a funny story. Because I had a friend in college who, her and her roommate, that's what they bonded over. Was she was obsessed with Monroe, and her friend was obsessed with Hepburn.
Okay.
her friend loved Hepburn from the movies. She had seen Breakfast at Tiffany's and all of those sort of things.
Yeah.
And that's what she loved. And she loved the style. They loved the cliche design that went with the whole thing. And at the time, it was very, like, popular to be into both of them as, like, a design trend.
It wasn't our Twilight where you're either Team Jacob or Team Edward.
No, and, like, it kind of worked in a favor because you could pick, like, theoretically, you could pick to be either the Audrey friend or the Monroe friend. Mm. And that's very much what they had done, and she had not seen this movie. And so I was like, oh, well, that's my favorite comedy movie. And at the time, I was like, honestly, I haven't seen very many Monroe's films, but I have seen that one, and I love it. And I've seen a couple interviews with her, and I think she's hilarious.
Yeah.
And my friend, who knew of her from that style, had not seen that movie. And when we watched it, her tune changed. And I don't think she was as big a fan after that, because that wasn't the person who she thought she was.
Yeah.
And I think, especially now, there has, because of that resurgence with the love of Audrey and Monroe, mm-hmm. It started off as a aesthetic, which is fine. I don't, like, there's no shame in just having an aesthetic for the sake of an aesthetic.
I mean, I watch movies because I think the lead actress is pretty.
I listen to music because the cover art looks cute. Like, and I either like it or I don't, but you have to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And so I think because there has been a resurgence in the quote-unquote vibe of Monroe and Audrey, I think their movies are starting to get more traction. And of course, you start with the big ones. And then you move on to the second wave ones. And this is that second wave group of Monroe movies. And I think that's why it keeps coming back as being as popular and people keep rediscovering it.
Yeah, and I think it's also just an accessibility of things too, because...
Yeah, this movie's hella accessible. You can find it anywhere.
Although I do highly recommend the Criterion Collection of this one.
Especially if you are a Monroe fan, because while there's not a whole lot directly from her, mm-hmm. a lot of people do talk about what it's like to work with her, and you do get to know more about her as a person. Yeah,
and just the commentary on this movie and just everything about it's so well put together.
Yes.
And I don't know, for me that's just it's an important movie.
It is. This is one of the few this is what I argue is one of the few historical, especially comedy movies that is a total package.
Yeah.
You don't just get a good movie, you do get a full story with the directors and the actors, not just the lead actor or actress, but with the whole cast.
Yeah.
And they didn't just cast anybody in this, like, which wasn't their original intent.
Yeah.
But because of who ended up in this movie, all of them ended up being important in some way.
Yeah.
Even the creepy old man.
It catapulted the two main leads' careers.
Yeah.
I mean, Lemon...
There's not a single person on this list who doesn't have an entire Wikipedia page about them.
Yeah. No, exactly. And it could have easily just fallen to the wayside and had a small resurgence here and there, but this one has lasted. And
I also think part of the reason it has lasted is while they did take risks with their jokes, which is something we see especially nowadays in comedy.
Yeah.
We see a lot of risky jokes. And some of them are risque, and some of them are just risky.
Yeah.
This one chose to take risque jokes, especially for the time period that this was written in and when it was meant to be set in. But it took those jokes with a sense of humanity.
Yeah.
It wasn't just a joke to be a joke. It was, honestly...
It was a joke with purpose.
It was a joke with purpose, and honestly, a bit of a thought-provoking joke.
Yeah.
You left the end kind of wondering what happens at the end, and honestly, like, who these people have turned into.
Yeah.
Even though, from the movie standpoint, they didn't change at all.
Yeah.
Character-wise, on paper, they are the same.
And, maybe that's part of it, is that it's just an entertaining movie. It's not trying to change your mind. It's not trying to do anything. It's just taking a situation and developing around it.
Yeah, but it also does so in a way that if you wanted to reflect on those values, there's room for that.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think that's part of the reason why when people do repick it up, because this is something that, especially as someone like me who likes old, like really old radio and TV and movies, it is easy to pick them up and rewatch them, and those ideas or the way that world worked don't work anymore unless you are a history buff and you fully understand that full concept. And even then, there's parts that no, you never are going to fully reappreciate. This movie doesn't have that problem because they're not trying to poke holes in something.
Yeah, well,
they are just there to expand.
And that's the other thing too, is the comedy is almost timeless. Yeah, it takes place during a certain era, but it's funny and that's it. Like that, it's not
there. And yeah, it takes place in a certain time period. And like we've said, they do throw in specifically 1930s slang.
Yeah.
But they don't throw in so much that you feel like you're speaking another language.
Yeah.
And it also doesn't feel like how sometimes we watch movies like what you said with the Sherlock and Holmes, where you're like, oh, that's going to date it in a negative way. This one, instead of dating it negatively, you can specifically pick out pieces that have a date to them, whether that's her dress or the slang or the car or the buildings. And yeah, timeline, they don't match up, but that's okay because that adds to the layers as opposed to tearing it down.
Yeah, exactly. So at the end of it all, Chris, we've gushed about this movie.
Oh, of course.
How likely would you be to recommend this in the end of it all?
This is one of the movies that I love. And while I don't own like an amazing copy of like the Criterion Collection version, this movie is incredibly easy to get a hold of. I think you can even watch it for free in places just because of how old it is starting to get. And so this is one of the ones that, unless I'm with someone who I know would spend too much time questioning the movie. Like, example, a great-great-grandmother from Kansas.
Yeah.
Who I don't have. I don't have a great-great-grandmother from Kansas. But, like, example of, like, if I had someone like that in my life, that would be, like, literally the only person who I might think twice about watching this movie with. And even then, I still might make them watch it.
It's funny that you bring that up. I'm sorry, Charlie. Yes, it technically is your feeding time. I apologize.
Dinner time.
I think that's funny because my mom listens to our podcast.
Hi.
And while she was telling me, because she's lost her headphones, and so she's been listening to us while she's at the gym.
I apologize.
Oh yeah, no, this is exactly where it's going. I'm sorry it's too late, Mom. You can't listen to this one live. I'll tell you about it, or tell you beforehand. But
I'm fully aware I have a potty sailor mouth.
Well, she was listening to the Nicolas Cage Drive Angry episode.
Oh yeah, that's not a good one to listen to.
And she was walking around the track and like got to the point of like us talking about him screwing the woman during the gunfight. Yeah, and she walked by like this old couple, and like it was just quiet enough. Like they thought it was like, did some male say something vulgar? And like looked over down on the on the lower floor to like, maybe there was some man down there. And my mom just like secretly
listening to our podcast.
Well, turned it off. She's like, I can't listen to this loudly.
I understand. I'm sorry.
I'm not at all. My mom should have known to begin with.
But at the same time, this is one of those movies where, yes, there are people in my life who, regardless of like their personal opinions, because this movie is so good and those are topics I usually would avoid with them, I don't give a shit. We're watching this movie. This movie is great, and like maybe then you can be less of a stick up your ass. I love this movie. I think it is one of the smartest, tightly written comedies. Yes.
To use lines from the movie, it curdles me.
It curdles you?
I mean, I enjoy it. It doesn't actually curdle me because I don't have to take a shit afterwards, but I enjoy this movie. It is... I can't not highly recommend this movie. It is one of the movies that I believe everyone should at least watch once in their life.
I do too. Yeah. I really do think that even if you're not a Marilyn Monroe like super fan or history buff, this one elapses all of that. Yeah. Yeah. This is a fantastic movie.
Yeah. I mean, there's a reason it's one of the top comedy movies ever made.
Arguably the top comedy movie ever made, depending on which list you look at.
I do lean that way as well, so. Yeah. But, anywho, this has been The Good, the Bad, and the Weird. Thanks for listening.
You stole my line.
I'm sorry. We'll redo it. This has been The Good, the Bad, and the Weird.
Thanks for listening.
peace, and join us next time where we kick off our next All-Star series. Woo-hoo. It's going to be a tangential 3-parter.
Get ready. Marathon time.
I'm excited. So, anywho, peace.